The narrative commenced with a gentle invitation, beckoning listeners to embark upon a tranquil and unhurried exploration of ancient myths, creatively reconceptualized throughout history. These particular tales were distinctly not the grand, sweeping epics commonly known, but rather intimate, hushed moments when divine beings subtly traversed the earthly realm, their formidable presence veiled within plain sight among mortals. Audiences were encouraged to dim their lights, settle comfortably beneath a blanket, and permit the day's cacophony to dissipate. The session promised to unfold 10 distinct stories, each one a soft whisper from antiquity, chronicling instances where ancient, potent powers found themselves navigating remarkably human situations. Some of these accounts were imbued with a touch of humor, others with profound tenderness, all thoughtfully designed to guide one gently towards restorative sleep. The suggestion was reiterated to further dim the ambient lighting, perhaps activating a fan to provide a soft, consistent background hum, thereby initiating this serene voyage through the currents of time and the depths of mythical lore. The narrative then shifted, inviting contemplation of a scenario where the venerable deities of antiquity made their initial appearance not upon the celestial heights of Mount Olympus, but rather within the sterile, bustling environment of a contemporary maternity ward. Overhead, the ubiquitous fluorescent fixtures emitted their characteristic low hum, while from a distant corridor, the plaintive cry of a newborn infant could be heard. Yet, the story underscored, these were not merely ordinary arrivals. Observers were, in fact, witnessing something truly phenomenal and beyond conventional understanding. Zeus, in this reimagined Genesis, did not manifest amidst a dramatic display of thunderbolts and celestial fury. Instead, his arrival was heralded by a subtle, almost imperceptible electrical emanation that remarkably amplified the hospital's wireless internet connectivity to an unprecedented degree. Nursing staff members, during their rounds, observed with surprise that their mobile devices consistently displayed a full 5 bars of signal strength, even in the subterranean levels of the facility. They lightheartedly exchanged jests about this curious phenomenon during their coffee breaks, entirely unaware that they were attending to the nascent form of the future sovereign of the Olympian pantheon, a being destined one day to wield dominion over tempests and skies, yet for the present moment, requiring nothing more than routine diaper changes every few hours, precisely like any other newborn. Concurrently, hairs entered the world 3 levels higher within the very same medical establishment on that identical auspicious night. The surveillance cameras monitoring the maternity ward exhibited an inexplicable tendency to repeatedly center their focus upon her designated nursery, as though an inherent quality within her irresistibly drew and commanded visual regard. The pediatric nurses, as they drew near her bassinet, found themselves instinctively adjusting their attire, an unconscious gesture of deference. Even in her infancy, she exuded an undeniable aura, a bearing that was both queenly and acutely observant. Her vocalizations, when she cried, resonated not as a typical expression of infantile discomfort, but rather as an authoritative pronouncement, a sovereign edict demanding instant and unequivocal redress. Meanwhile, within the neonatal intensive care unit, Athena, though arriving ahead of schedule yet impeccably structured, opened her eyes with an astounding prematurity, far earlier than typical for an infant. The attending neonatologist, Dr. Martinez, emphatically affirmed that the baby had gazed directly into her eyes with a profundity indicative of ancient sagacity. While internally dismissing this as impossible, she nonetheless meticulously documented the observation in the patient's medical record. Subsequent brain scans performed on the infant Athena revealed anomalous neural activity within regions typically associated with sophisticated strategic contemplation. The medical personnel initially ascribed these findings to a potential malfunction in their diagnostic apparatus. Yet, compelled by an inexplicable urge, they diligently conducted the examinations an additional 3 times to confirm their initial assessment. Simultaneously, in a distinct medical facility located across the sprawling urban landscape, Apollo and Artemis made their grand entrance as a pair of twins, born to a gifted music instructor and an attentive park warden. The delivery chamber became suffused with an ethereal, inexplicable golden luminescence, which the medical personnel readily attributed to nothing more than the setting sun's rays penetrating the windows at an exceptionally precise angle. Apollo's inaugural cry resonated with an almost melodic quality, a pristine note that compelled every individual present in the room to momentarily halt their activities and break into a gentle smile. Artemis, her twin, emerged into the world without a sound, yet remarkably vigilant, her silver-gray eyes meticulously observing every minute particularity of her new surroundings. The twins' parents, Sarah and Mike, immediately began to perceive unusual occurrences. All botanical life within their residence flourished with an unnatural vigor, surpassing all reasonable expectations. During their strolls, neighboring felines inexplicably trailed Artemis's perambulator. When Apollo vocalized his infant needs, avian creatures would congregate outside the window, not in a state of agitation, but as though responding to an unspoken summons. Sarah conveyed these peculiar observations to her mother, who promptly dismissed them as mere happenstance. Yet Sarah herself harbored persistent doubts. Approximately 40 minutes distant, nestled within a tranquil suburban community, Aphrodite entered the world, born to a couple who operated a modest floral establishment. Her delivery proved exceptionally facile, and subsequently, every individual who stepped into the hospital room remarked upon the pervasive aesthetic beauty of their surroundings, the quality of the afternoon light, the graceful drape of the window coverings, and even the prosaic hospital blankets appeared imbued with an enhanced elegance. Florists dispatched to deliver arrangements to the maternity ward found themselves inexplicably selecting particularly magnificent and captivating bouquets, despite their inability to articulate the precise motivation. Infant Aphrodite exhibited an uncharacteristic placidity, rarely displaying agitation. She surveyed her environment with eyes that seemed to grasp an intrinsic, profound understanding of both aesthetic appeal and interpersonal bonding. When her parents cradled her, they observed a spontaneous tendency to address each other with greater affection and to share laughter with increased spontaneity. The pervasive influence was understated, yet utterly undeniable. Ares, by contrast, made his advent amidst the tumultuous energy of a thunderstorm, arriving to a military family within the confines of a base hospital. His mother's labor, though exceedingly rigorous, was notably brief, and the instant of his emergence coincided precisely with a palpable subsidence of the tempest raging outdoors. His father, Staff Sergeant Williams, lightheartedly quipped that his newborn son possessed an innate fighting spirit, a jest prompted by the infant's surprisingly robust grasp. Young Ares slumbered serenely through even the most cacophonous disturbances, the wailing of sirens, the booming of thunder, the cries of other infants, yet would become acutely attentive at the slightest intimation of discord or affliction, as if his very being were already attuned to the vibrational essence of contention. In a picturesque coastal settlement, Poseidon came into existence, born to a pair of dedicated marine biologists precisely at the apex of the high tide. His mother's labor commenced with uncanny precision as the tide began its inward surge, and the infant's arrival coincided with the moment when the ocean waves reached their most forceful crescendo against the shoreline. The medical facility, strategically situated adjacent to the water, typically contended with intermittent deficiencies in water pressure on its upper levels. However, on this particular evening, every tap flowed with an unimpeachable, consistent force. The maintenance crew, while utterly perplexed by this anomaly, expressed profound gratitude. Infant Poseidon exhibited a distinct affinity for auditory stimuli related to water, the gentle rush of a running faucet, the patter of rain against window panes, and even the subtle clinking of ice cubes settling in a beverage glass. His parents, both ardent devotees of the ocean, considered this inclination entirely natural. Yet visitors invariably observed how the baby achieved immediate tranquility upon hearing any water-associated sound, as if acknowledging a venerable acquaintance. Demeter, fittingly, was born to agriculturalists during the height of the harvest season. Her mother's labor commenced precisely at daybreak, just as her parents were making ready for their daily toil in the expansive fields. Her arrival coincided with the full ascent of the sun, and remarkably, every single crop cultivated on their land appeared to reach a state of flawless maturity that very day. Local residents humorously suggested that the newborn had bestowed an extraordinary blessing of good fortune. Yet Demeter's parents observed a tangible difference. Their garden vegetables grew to unprecedented sizes and acquired an unparalleled sweetness. The infant Demeter demonstrated the greatest serenity when in proximity to burgeoning flora. Her infant complaints would cease entirely when she was carried through the verdant garden, and the houseplants adorning her nursery exhibited an extraordinary, robust vitality. Her inaugural smile graced her face when her mother cradled her near the kitchen's aromatic herb garden, enveloped by the fragrant essences of basil and rosemary. Within an expansive artist's loft situated in the heart of the metropolis, Hephaestus was brought into the world, the progeny of a skilled sculptor and an adept metalworker. His delivery proved to be a challenging ordeal, and he emerged with a slight congenital leg anomaly that would necessitate a course of physical therapy. Nevertheless, his parents embraced him with unreserved delight. A remarkable consequence of his birth was the palpable improvement in the functionality of every implement within his father's workshop. Previously rigid joints now operated with fluid smoothness, and metals that had once resisted manipulation became surprisingly malleable. Infant Hephaestus displayed an intense preoccupation with various textures and mechanical devices. He instinctively reached for his father's meticulously stored and sanitized hammers before showing any interest in conventional playthings. His small hands appeared to possess an innate comprehension of assembly and operational mechanisms. His parents playfully speculated that he might one day become an engineer, entirely oblivious to the profound accuracy of their ancient, unwitting prophecy. Lastly, within the vibrant confines of a bustling downtown medical center, Hermes made his entrance, the offspring of parents engaged in the intricate fields of logistics and communications. His delivery was astonishingly rapid, proceeding with such celerity that he very nearly arrived prematurely within the confines of an elevator car, suspended between floors. From his earliest instance of existence, he exhibited an extraordinary degree of vigilance and physical agility, attaining developmental milestones significantly ahead of typical schedules. He adeptly rolled over, sat upright, and began to crawl, all with precocious timing. His parents, employed by rival courier enterprises, observed a consistent pattern. On occasions when infant Hermes displayed heightened activity, their respective delivery circuits appeared to operate with enhanced fluidity. Traffic signals would serendipitously illuminate green at precisely opportune moments. Parcels reached their destinations sooner than anticipated, and exchanges with dispatch personnel were noticeably more lucid than customary. These 12 infants, all delivered within the identical calendar year and across the same sprawling metropolitan region, matured into ostensibly typical children, save for a collection of minor, almost imperceptible distinctions. They consistently demonstrated exceptional aptitude in specialized domains, exhibited an innate gravitation towards specific elemental forces, and exerted an idiosyncratic influence upon their immediate surroundings. Their respective parents frequently exchanged observations gleaned from pediatrician appointments and shared playdates, thereby cultivating a nascent community centered around these remarkably gifted, yet unconventional, youngsters. As these children progressed through their formative years, attending the same educational institutions and frequenting the same recreational areas, an intriguing phenomenon began to unfold. When they convened, their collective influences became markedly more accentuated. Playground apparatus appeared to operate with enhanced security. The garden plots established within the school's environmental curriculum thrived with extraordinary vitality. The school's wireless internet infrastructure remained perpetually stable, never succumbing to outages, and educators noted how these specific children collaborated with an inherent synergy, as if their shared understanding predated their brief years of earthly existence. One might ponder, then, the implications if divine omnipotence were to manifest not through spectacular, dramatic miracles, but rather as subtle, ameliorative enhancements to the routines of daily existence. What if deities were to traverse human society not as colossal, awe-inspiring personages, but as innocent children who subtly rendered their immediate world slightly more congenial, a touch more interconnected, and imbued with a touch more enchantment? Perhaps, the narrative suggests, the truly pertinent inquiry is not whether ancient gods could conceivably be born into our contemporary global society, but rather whether humanity would possess the discernment to acknowledge them were such an extraordinary event to transpire. Transitioning from the theme of divine beings coexisting among mortals, the narrative then introduced the figure of a man named Demetrius Koronos, who served as a primary school instructor in the ancient city of Sparta during the profoundly challenging era of World War II's darkest days. His patronymic, Koronos, held the etymological significance of thunder in the lexicon of ancient Greek, an ironic contrast to his disposition as the most exceptionally gentle educator the children had ever encountered. He could routinely be observed each morning at precisely 6:30 a.m., diligently sweeping the entrance steps of the modest stone schoolhouse, meticulously preparing for yet another day dedicated to the instruction of children whose fathers were absent, engaged in the distant conflict, and whose mothers labored for hours unprecedented in their lives. Demetrius was a recent arrival to the village, having established himself just prior to the outbreak of hostilities, asserting his origins from the northern regions and expressing a desire for unobtrusive employment within the educational sector. The schoolchildren held him in profound affection, though they remained unable to fully articulate the precise reasons for their deep admiration. Couldn't quite articulate the reason. When the esteemed Demetrius graced a classroom with his presence, an almost palpable hush would descend, captivating even the most boisterous and disinclined pupils. His voice possessed an inherent gravitas, imbuing every scholastic pursuit with profound significance and rendering each narrative a treasure worthy of preservation. As he expounded upon the glories of ancient Greece, his gaze would drift to a distant point, as if he were recounting personal reminiscences rather than merely imparting information gleaned from conventional texts. The ravages of war had wrought widespread scarcity, impacting everything from writing materials to sustenance, and even the very spirit of hope. Yet, paradoxically, Demetrius's educational sanctuary never appeared to suffer from want. When his fellow educators found their chalk supply dwindled to nothing, his own receptacle remained inexplicably replete. During the harsh grip of winter, when the school building became almost uninhabitable, his classroom mysteriously maintained a comfortable warmth, despite the absence of any discernible additional heating apparatus. The young scholars observed these anomalies but refrained from questioning them, understanding that adults bore far weightier burdens in those tumultuous wartime years. Maria Stavros, a perceptive 8-year-old, was the first among the children to harbor the suspicion that their instructor might possess extraordinary qualities. During a particularly ferocious thunderstorm, a tempest that compelled other classes to seek refuge beneath their desks in fear, Demetrius calmly unlatched the windows and bid his students to listen intently. "The heavens are engaged in a profound discourse," he intoned with tranquil assurance. "Can you discern the message they convey?" Astonishingly, the storm's fury seemed to abate as he spoke, as if the very elements were heeding his words. On another occasion, young Nikos Papandreou, whose father was bravely engaged in combat in Albania, inquired of Demetrius whether he believed the conflict would soon draw to a close. The teacher thoughtfully regarded the accumulating clouds beyond the window and remarked, "Certain tempests must run their predetermined course, yet every storm inevitably dissipates." That very afternoon, the village received its inaugural piece of welcome news in many months. A communique announcing Nikos's father was unharmed and would soon be returning home for a period of leave. The venerable schoolmaster exhibited several distinctive eccentricities. He was never observed carrying an umbrella, yet he invariably remained dry even amidst the heaviest downpours. He possessed an uncanny ability to forecast meteorological shifts days in advance, a foresight that proved invaluable to local families in preparing their modest garden plots and safeguarding their dwindling livestock. Farmers, initially hesitant, soon began to seek his counsel informally, and his predictions consistently proved unerringly accurate. During the brutal winter of 1941-42, when provisions became acutely scarce, Demetrius initiated the organization of communal repasts within the school courtyard. Inexplicably, pots of hearty stew, ostensibly sufficient for 20 individuals, would miraculously expand to nourish 40. Families would contribute whatever meager provisions they could spare: a handful of potatoes, some barley, wild foraged greens, and depart feeling more sated than the collected ingredients should have possibly allowed. Father Andreas, the village priest, frequently observed these gatherings with profound astonishment. He noted that whenever Demetrius offered a quiet blessing over the food, almost a whispered invocation, there invariably proved to be an abundance. The priest, a man who had dedicated years to theological study, had never witnessed anything quite comparable to this unassuming schoolteacher's remarkable influence, not only over the vagaries of the weather, but also within the fabric of the community itself. One evening, as the villagers converged for one of these shared meals, the ominous drone of German patrol planes echoed overhead. Instantly, all eyes instinctively turned skyward, gripped by a familiar terror, as aerial bombardments had become an increasingly frequent occurrence. Demetrius, however, remained perfectly composed, his gaze fixed upon the firmament. The aircraft circled once, then a second time, before continuing their trajectory northward without incident. The villagers attributed this fortunate outcome to sheer luck, yet Demetrius offered a subtle smile, one that hinted at a deeper understanding beyond their comprehension. As the months unfolded, the children began to circulate tales about their teacher that bordered on the fantastical. Little Anna solemnly swore she had witnessed Demetrius conversing with the majestic eagles that nested in the craggy hills overlooking the schoolhouse. Petro vehemently asserted that his instructor possessed the unique ability to entice lightning bugs into jars simply by making a polite request. Sophia, with unwavering conviction, insisted that whenever Demetrius experienced profound joy, the classroom itself became imbued with an almost electrical charge, causing their hair to stand slightly on end. While the adults largely dismissed these narratives as products of childish fancy, they harbored private wonderings. There was an undeniable quality about Demetrius Koronos that defied conventional explanation. He never appeared fatigued, never succumbed to illness, and remarkably, never lost his composure even when confronted with the most challenging and recalcitrant students. His vivid lessons on the rich tapestry of Greek mythology were so compelling that the children would find themselves dreaming of them for days thereafter. During the spring of 1942, British aircraft commenced regular aerial supply drops intended for Greek resistance fighters who lay concealed within the treacherous mountain ranges. These clandestine operations were meant to be highly secretive, yet Demetrius invariably seemed to possess foreknowledge of their timing. On such days, he would strategically assign outdoor lessons, guiding his class to expansive hillside meadows where they would engage in reading and arithmetic exercises, all the while conveniently positioned to observe the parachutes gracefully descending like ethereal blossoms unfurling in the sky. The resistance combatants, profoundly appreciative of his discretion and invaluable assistance, began to hold hushed meetings with Demetrius. While he never directly participated in their missions, his precise meteorological forecasts proved instrumental in helping them evade German patrols and orchestrate successful operations. They bestowed upon him the moniker Koronos the Oracle, unaware of how remarkably close to the truth that appellation truly was. As the protracted conflict persisted and living conditions progressively deteriorated, Demetrius's quiet yet potent presence became even more indispensable to the village's very survival. His gentle leadership effectively mediated disputes arising from dwindling resources. His unwavering dedication to teaching kept the children's intellects stimulated and their spirits imbued with hope, even when all else appeared bleak and despairing. His profound understanding of weather patterns enabled farmers to maximize their meager harvests. Most significantly, however, he instilled in the populace something profound to believe in. When he recounted the inspiring sagas of ancient heroes triumphing against seemingly insurmountable odds, when he patiently elucidated how all storms eventually recede and spring invariably returns, when he gazed at the heavens with an absolute conviction in the advent of brighter days, the villagers found themselves believing too. One day in early 1943, as the prospect of liberation, though still distant, began to seem plausible, Maria Stavros, now a more mature and courageous 9-year-old, finally articulated the question that had silently preoccupied all the children. "Demetrius, are you truly one of the old gods from the stories we hear?" The teacher responded with a gentle smile and placed a comforting hand upon her head. For a fleeting instant, the air around them seemed to shimmer, carrying the subtle fragrance of mountain rain and ozone. "What do you surmise, my little one?" he inquired softly. "Does it truly matter what I am? Or does what we accomplish for one another hold greater significance?" Maria pondered this deeply and concluded that his sustained presence, offering assistance for their survival, education, and hope, was of paramount importance, irrespective of his true identity. When the devastating war finally concluded and the German occupation forces retreated, the village erupted in joyous celebration within the familiar confines of the school courtyard. Demetrius stood unobtrusively at the periphery of the jubilant throng, observing his students and their families embrace and weep tears of profound relief and happiness. As the festivities extended into the evening, villagers gradually realized that their beloved teacher had quietly departed. Their search for him the following day yielded only a single note left upon his desk: "Continue to nurture and care for one another. Always remember that every storm passes, and shared wisdom only strengthens with time." Within the desk drawer, they discovered meticulously prepared lesson plans for the upcoming academic year and an ample supply of materials to ensure the continued operation of the school. Demetrius Koronos was never again seen in that particular guise, in that specific locale. Yet, on certain tempestuous nights, when a gentle rain caressed the village gardens and distant thunder rumbled softly across the surrounding hills, the elderly inhabitants would swear they could discern a familiar voice in the very sky, still imparting invaluable lessons about perseverance, communal solidarity, and the enduring certainty that challenging periods are never eternal. Perhaps the most profound magic he wielded was not in his ability to command the elements or miraculously multiply provisions, but rather in his capacity to demonstrate to people that even deities, when truly enlightened, choose to serve humanity rather than to rule over it. At times, the most divine action one can undertake is to assist a child in learning to read, to ensure that no one suffers from hunger, or simply to be a comforting presence when individuals are most in need of hope. And perhaps that is a universal lesson from which we could all benefit. Whether we perceive ourselves as exiled divinities or merely as human beings striving valiantly during arduous epochs, the sagacity of divine instructors and patient gods guides us to yet another narrative of understated power. This particular account unfolds amidst the rugged mountains of 19th century Greece, following the defeat of Napoleon, while the expansive Ottoman Empire still exerted its dominion over Greek territories. There lived an extraordinary woman named Kyrio Vasiliki, who would fundamentally alter the prevailing perceptions of marriage, personal autonomy, and the inherent rights of widows throughout an entire region. One would invariably have found her each dawn as the sun began its ascent, traversing the meticulously terraced vineyards situated above the picturesque village of Mistress. She would diligently inspect the vines that, against all odds, yielded the most exceptional grapes in the entire Peloponnese region. Vasiliki had endured the sorrow of widowhood 3 years prior, when her husband tragically perished in a construction accident, leaving her with 2 young offspring and a modest but remarkably productive parcel of land. In accordance with established societal customs, a widow was traditionally expected to remarry swiftly for pragmatic considerations, the imperative for protection, financial stability, and maintaining social standing. The village matchmakers had diligently presented her with several seemingly suitable prospective partners, including her late husband's brother, a conventional choice, and the eldest son of the mayor, which would have conferred considerable social advantage. However, Vasiliki, with quiet resolve, unwavering politeness, and consistent firmness, declined every single proposal. This was not an act of overt rebellion in the dramatic sense of the word. Vasiliki never raised her voice in protest, nor delivered grandiose pronouncements. She simply conducted her life with such an exemplary degree of competence and dignified self-sufficiency that people gradually began to question why marriage was considered an absolute necessity. Her children flourished under her devoted care. Her vineyard consistently produced superior wine compared to farms tended by multiple generations of men. Her humble abode was perpetually immaculate, always extending a warm welcome, and inexplicably always contained sufficient provisions for unexpected visitors. Initially, Father Mollis, the village priest, harbored concerns regarding the potential influence of this unmarried woman on the proper social order. However, upon visiting her home to address the matter, he was astonished to discover her daughter engrossed in advanced texts in both Greek and Turkish, her son mastering arithmetic skills that surpassed those of most adult villagers, and Vasiliki herself demonstrating an impressive breadth of knowledge spanning law, agriculture, and medicine, which appeared far to exceed her formal education. "From where did you acquire such extensive understanding of legal affairs?" He inquired, genuinely intrigued. Vasiliki offered a serene smile and gestured toward a collection of books and documents she meticulously kept within a sturdy wooden chest. When one is compelled to safeguard the inheritance of one's children and to preserve one's own independence, one learns precisely what is required, she stated with elegant simplicity. "To know," she articulated with understated simplicity. Whispers began to circulate throughout the region concerning the widow, a woman whose grasp of Ottoman property law surpassed the understanding of even seasoned local magistrates. Her intuitive predictions of weather patterns frequently outmaneuvered the forecasts of farmers boasting decades of experience, and she possessed an almost preternatural ability to mediate and resolve disputes that arose between neighbors. Consequently, individuals from various walks of life started seeking her counsel, not merely for agricultural dilemmas, but also for intricate legal quandaries, deeply entrenched family conflicts, and pivotal business decisions. The true turning point in her burgeoning influence arrived with the audacious challenge posed by Kyrios Panayotis, an affluent landowner hailing from a neighboring village. He brazenly attempted to lay claim to a segment of Vasiliki's vineyard, asserting that a woman, by legal custom, could not legitimately possess such valuable real estate without the direct oversight of a male guardian. To bolster his spurious claim, he arrived armed with official-looking documents and presented 2 ostensible witnesses who solemnly swore that Vasiliki's late husband had, prior to his untimely demise, pledged to sell the very land in question. The prevailing expectation within the village was that Vasiliki, faced with such a formidable challenge, would either capitulate to this demand or, at the very least, seek the intervention of her male relatives to represent her interests. However, defying all conventional wisdom and expectation, she presented herself at the local administrator's office, not with a plea for assistance, but with her own meticulously organized and clearly annotated documents, ready to defend her rights. She did not merely furnish irrefutable proof of her unequivocal ownership of the property. She also adduced compelling evidence demonstrating that Panayotis had engaged in similar predatory land grabs, targeting other vulnerable widows across the broader region. Her presentation was characterized by its exceptional thoroughness, and her command of intricate legal procedure was so profoundly impressive that the administrator, a Turkish official who had initially harbored a degree of sympathy for Panayotis's claim, not only ruled unequivocally in Vasiliki's favor, but also initiated a comprehensive investigation into the landowner's other questionable and potentially illicit acquisitions. In the wake of this resounding victory, a steady stream of other women, emboldened by Vasiliki's success, began to approach her, seeking assistance with their own property disputes, complex inheritance questions, and a myriad of other legal predicaments. While she steadfastly refused to accept any payment for her invaluable assistance, families, out of profound gratitude and respect, began to bring her thoughtful gifts of nourishing food, fine cloth, and essential tools. Her modest household thus organically evolved into a unique, informal legal aid center, serving the needs of women throughout the scattered mountain villages. What rendered Vasiliki's burgeoning influence particularly noteworthy was the ingenious and subtle approach she adopted to address these deeply ingrained societal problems. She never launched a direct assault upon the existing social order or its established hierarchies. Instead, she masterfully demonstrated how women could navigate and operate successfully within its confines, provided they possessed an accurate understanding of their actual legal rights, rather than passively accepting the limitations imposed by traditional customs and expectations. She systematically educated wives and widows, imparting to them the critical skills to meticulously read and interpret property documents, to comprehend the intricacies of inheritance law, and to diligently document their invaluable contributions to family businesses. The local matchmakers, who had initially expressed frustration over her resolute refusal to remarry, gradually developed a grudging respect for her autonomous choice, particularly as they witnessed the extraordinary efficacy with which she managed her personal and financial affairs. Some among them even began to cautiously suggest that perhaps the young women they represented should consider postponing marriage until they had acquired a more thorough understanding of their own legal and financial situations. During the quieter winter months, when the demanding work in the vineyards significantly lessened, Vasiliki initiated informal gatherings within the comforting confines of her home. Here, women could acquire fundamental literacy skills, master basic arithmetic, and grasp essential legal principles. These were not boisterous political convocations. Rather, they deliberately resembled traditional women's work gatherings, complete with the rhythmic hum of spinning wheels, the intricate art of weaving, and the convivial preparation of food. However, the discourse subtly shifted, focusing intently on practical education and empowering knowledge, rather than engaging in idle gossip. Her daughter Sophia flourished remarkably within this intellectually stimulating environment, becoming so exceptionally well educated that the village teacher, a man of considerable learning, frequently sought her counsel on particularly challenging questions. Her son, Demetrius, matured with a profound understanding and appreciation for women as capable decision-makers and as equally vital partners in the management of the household. Both children were unequivocally being prepared for futures that transcended and expanded far beyond traditional gender roles. The most profound and far-reaching change manifested when several young women in the village, inspired by Vasiliki's example, began to respectfully ask their fathers to delay their arranged marriages. Their request was to be granted sufficient time to properly prepare themselves through Vasiliki's informal education program. In stark contrast to the customary few months typically allotted between betrothal and wedding, families began to permit a full year or even two for brides to cultivate essential practical skills and acquire crucial legal knowledge. This significant societal shift yielded unforeseen benefits for every member of the community. Marriages became notably more stable, as women entered into them armed with realistic expectations and a wealth of practical understanding. Families experienced greater prosperity because wives could contribute far more effectively to household economics and astute property management. Even the men discovered that educated wives proved to be more intellectually stimulating companions and more demonstrably capable partners in life. Local officials, who had initially regarded any gathering that might potentially challenge established authority with deep suspicion, gradually came to recognize that Vasiliki's pervasive influence, far from being subversive, actually served to strengthen community stability. Property disputes significantly decreased, family businesses operated with greater efficiency, and the region began to cultivate a distinguished reputation for producing particularly capable and resourceful women who, rather than posing a threat to the social order, actively bolstered the strength and resilience of their families. As the years gracefully unfolded, Vasiliki remained steadfast in her decision never to remarry. Although several worthy men periodically continued to propose to her, she had meticulously fashioned a life that profoundly satisfied her intellectually, emotionally, and practically. Her children matured into highly educated, self-assured adults. Her vineyard continued to yield abundant prosperity. Her well-deserved reputation as a wise and sagacious counselor spread far beyond the immediate confines of her region. Other widows, inspired by her pioneering example, began to follow her lead, choosing to remain unmarried and establishing independent households founded upon their own skills and resources. This was no longer perceived as a radical act, primarily because Vasiliki had demonstrably proven that such arrangements could, in fact, strengthen rather than imperil the stability and cohesion of the community. When Greek independence was finally achieved in the 1820s, the region was already well accustomed to the sight of strong, capable women assuming significant leadership roles in both family and community affairs. The transition to the new political arrangements proved considerably smoother than in many other areas, largely because local women were thoroughly prepared to manage increased responsibilities, thereby allowing men to concentrate their energies on the pressing military and political changes. Vasiliki herself lived to a venerable age, well into her 80s, perpetually surrounded by her beloved children, cherished grandchildren, and a thriving community of women who had absorbed the profound lesson that marriage could be a conscious choice, rather than an inescapable economic necessity. Her vineyard, a testament to her enduring legacy, passed into the capable hands of her daughter, who had, by her own informed choice, married a man who deeply respected her education and cherished her independence. Her son, following in his mother's footsteps, became an enlightened teacher who ardently insisted on providing girls with an education as thorough and rigorous as that afforded to boys. Towards the twilight of her remarkable life, when gently questioned about her steadfast decision to remain unmarried, Vasiliki offered a profound and insightful reply. "I never rejected marriage itself. What I refused was marriage without understanding, without genuine choice, without inherent dignity." Perhaps the most crucial lesson I imparted was that women, much like fine wine, achieve greater value and depth with patience, with knowledge, and under the proper conditions for growth. Her enduring legacy was not characterized by dramatic revolution or tumultuous upheaval, but rather by a quiet, yet profound, transformation of societal expectations concerning what women could truly accomplish and what marriage could authentically become when entered into freely by educated and self-aware partners. Occasionally, the most profound and lasting changes do not arise from direct conflict or confrontation, but rather from competent individuals simply choosing to live their lives differently, thereby demonstrating to others the boundless possibilities that emerge from such choices. And perhaps that is precisely how genuine social change often operates, not through grand, theatrical gestures, but through the quiet, persistent efforts of individuals who, by their very existence, powerfully illustrate that alternative choices can indeed lead to superior outcomes for everyone involved. Apollo and the Radio Station of Thessaloniki, 1973. The compelling notion of quiet transformation, achieved through patient wisdom and subtle influence, seamlessly transports us to 1970s Greece. During a period defined by the iron grip of military junta rule, an era when pervasive censorship and palpable political tension rendered even the simplest expressions of culture fraught with danger, a small, unassuming radio station in the northern city of Thessaloniki somehow managed to radiate glimmers of hope through the darkest years of the dictatorship. One would have discovered this particular station nestled within a converted apartment building, located 3 flights up from the bustling street below. Here, a solitary man diligently worked the overnight shift, meticulously broadcasting from midnight until the early hours of 6 a.m. His program, affectionately known as Songs Before Dawn, officially presented traditional Greek music and poetry, each selection carefully vetted and approved by the government censors. However, listeners scattered across the entirety of northern Greece intuitively understood that something truly extraordinary transpired during those tranquil hours when the majority of the populace was deep in slumber. He had first appeared in Thessaloniki in 1971, presenting himself at the radio station to apply for work, armed with an impeccable array of credentials in the fields of music, literature, and communications. His references, purportedly from reputable universities and esteemed cultural institutions, checked out perfectly upon verification, although curiously, no one at these establishments seemed to distinctly recall him. He conversed in modern Greek with flawless fluency, yet occasionally he would employ ancient-sounding phrases, as if he had acquired the language centuries ago and was still in the gradual process of adapting to contemporary usage. The overnight shift was universally regarded as the least desirable, primarily due to the significantly smaller number of listeners, minimal supervisory oversight, and its principal function of merely filling airtime until the commencement of morning programming. Nevertheless, he specifically requested this particular shift, explaining that he preferred the quiet, contemplative hours when people were, in his estimation, most receptive to the profound beauty of music and poetry. The station manager, undoubtedly grateful to secure an individual willing to undertake the less popular night work, did not further question this peculiar preference. From his very first broadcast, an undeniable sense of difference permeated Songs Before Dawn. The host possessed a voice that seemed to intrinsically carry light itself, warm, exquisitely clear, and imbued with an inherent sense of comfort, even when he ventured into discussions of challenging or somber topics. He addressed his audience as if speaking to cherished personal friends, acknowledging their shared struggles and unspoken anxieties without ever directly criticizing the government, and offering profound encouragement without ever making dangerously overt political statements. His meticulously curated musical selections were, on the surface, officially traditional. Yet, through some ineffable artistry, the songs he chose collectively wove together messages that pure, unadulterated propaganda could never hope to convey. Ancient melodies that subtly evoked themes of freedom, poignant poems that spoke of indomitable resilience, and timeless folk songs that celebrated communities united in mutual support through periods of adversity. The ever-vigilant censors approved every single item, precisely because each individual song, when isolated, appeared utterly harmless. But the discerning listeners, with their hearts and minds, heard a far deeper, resonant conversation about enduring hope and unwavering human endurance. A deeper conversation about hope and endurance. Individuals toiling through the nocturnal hours across the entire geographical expanse. Dedicated healthcare professionals, vigilant security personnel, diligent taxi operators, and bakers crafting the day's first sustenance increasingly relied upon the radio host's particular broadcast to alleviate the arduous solitude of their shifts. His resonant voice, traversing the pervasive gloom, forged a profound link among these disparate individuals, weaving them into an unseen fellowship of auditors who discovered solace and resilience within a common cultural tapestry and a subtle, unspoken defiance. A compassionate nurse, serving tirelessly within the bustling confines of the city hospital, would subsequently recall with vivid clarity how the enigmatic host possessed an uncanny intuition, seemingly discerning precisely the emotional and intellectual nourishment his audience required. During evenings marked by widespread political detentions that cast a pall of apprehension over countless families, he would thoughtfully select and broadcast exceptionally soothing musical pieces. Conversely, when the relentless grip of economic adversity rendered everyday existence increasingly challenging, he would impart verses of poetry extolling the virtues of steadfast endurance and the profound strength found in collective unity. Furthermore, as the authoritarian regime's censorship measures grew ever more stringent, he ingeniously devised imaginative avenues to extol Greek heritage, subtly imbuing his broadcasts with reminders of enduring values that transcended the ephemeral dictates of political governance. One of the broadcast's most extraordinary characteristics resided in the host's exceptional proficiency in managing requests from his dedicated listenership. Individuals were afforded the opportunity to either phone in directly or dispatch written correspondence, soliciting specific musical pieces dedicated to relatives, companions, or to commemorate momentous life events. With an almost preternatural ability, He consistently appeared to possess the perfectly apposite melody or recitation for every conceivable circumstance, a feat made even more astonishing when considering requests for compositions that had long faded from contemporary popularity, or for obscure poetry anthologies that were notoriously challenging to locate. A discernible demographic of university scholars, notably those immersed in the rigorous study of classical antiquity and literary arts, commenced the practice of extending their waking hours specifically to tune into songs before dawn. This was primarily due to the host's occasional dissemination of profound observations concerning ancient Greek textual traditions, insights that were conspicuously absent from standard academic curricula and published textbooks. His comprehension of classical poetic forms conveyed an extraordinary depth and an intensely personal connection, almost as if he had been an eyewitness to the initial genesis of these revered works. Throughout the pivotal year of 1973, as the political climate grew increasingly volatile and the military junta's authoritarian grip tightened with escalating oppression, the host's nightly broadcast assumed an even greater, indispensable significance for its devoted audience. While he meticulously refrained from uttering any overt political declarations, his judicious and thoughtful selection of Greek cultural artifacts served as a potent, unspoken reminder to the populace of their nation's venerable legacy of enduring arduous epochs and ultimately triumphing over tyrannical forces. The far-reaching impact of the radio program transcended mere recreational listening, permeating deeper into the societal fabric. Educators, confronting heightened governmental restrictions, ingeniously started integrating melodies and lyrical compositions sourced from songs before dawn into their pedagogical frameworks, thereby discovering clandestine methods to safeguard Greek cultural instruction. Furthermore, households frequently converged around their radio receivers during the broadcast, utilizing the evocative power of the music as a catalyst for recounting ancestral narratives and meticulously preserving vital links to cherished traditions that the prevailing political climate assiduously sought to obliterate. Arguably, the most profound contribution of the host was his masterful cultivation of a palpable sense of historical continuity, bridging the venerable ancient heritage of Greece with the immediate tribulations confronting its people. Through his carefully curated broadcasts, the program subtly posited that the inherent fortitude and resilience which had sustained Greek civilization across millennia of formidable challenges remained an accessible and potent resource for contemporary individuals grappling with their own unique adversities. Curiously, the broadcasting station's technical apparatus appeared to function with an uncommon degree of efficacy, specifically during the host's operational hours. Station engineers frequently observed that the quality of the transmission remained uniformly superb from the stroke of midnight until the early hours of 6 a.m., conspicuously devoid of the myriad technical glitches and interruptions that habitually afflicted other broadcast periods. Moreover, the station's signal inexplicably managed to propagate significantly beyond its anticipated range, with listeners frequently attesting to crystal-clear reception in secluded mountain communities and distant island locales where other radio transmissions typically struggled to penetrate with any clarity. While governmental oversight bodies periodically scrutinized the program's content, they consistently failed to identify any material deemed objectionable or subversive. The host, with meticulous precision, ensured his broadcasts adhered rigorously to all official directives and established parameters. Yet, his discerning audience intuitively grasped that he was providing a commodity far more profound than mere amusement, an implicit reaffirmation that the enduring essence of Greek culture possessed a resilience superior to any transient political structure, destined to persist and ultimately transcend the prevailing tribulations. As the year 1973 advanced, moving inexorably towards the pivotal occurrences that would ultimately precipitate the downfall of the military junta, Songs Before Dawn escalated in its profound significance, serving as an indispensable wellspring of optimism and a bulwark of cultural identity. Although the host steadfastly avoided any overt prognostication of political upheaval, his meticulously chosen repertoire of musical pieces and poetic recitations appeared to subtly ready his listeners for the profound prospect that periods of hardship were inherently transient, and that a more auspicious future lay on the horizon. The program's most indelible episode unfolded in November 1973, amidst the tumultuous student insurrection at the Athens Polytechnic, at a time when the majority of media outlets were subjected to draconian censorship. The host masterfully succeeded in indirectly recognizing the unfolding events by broadcasting a carefully curated sequence of musical compositions celebrating themes of youthful vitality, intrepid courage, and the noble act of self-sacrifice in pursuit of cherished ideals. His astute listeners unequivocally comprehended that he was, in essence, paying homage to the students' profound bravery without overtly contravening any prevailing broadcasting mandates. Subsequent to the eventual collapse of the junta in 1974, widespread anticipation suggested that Songs Before Dawn would undergo a significant transformation, potentially adopting a more overtly political or contemporary character. Contrary to these expectations, however, the host steadfastly maintained his characteristic gentle demeanor and broadcasting philosophy, continuing to feature traditional music and timeless poetry. This consistent approach served as a powerful reminder to the Greek populace of their rich cultural patrimony and underscored the enduring imperative of nurturing communal solidarity amidst any societal transitions. Nevertheless, with the re-establishment of democratic governance and Greece embarking upon a swift trajectory of modernization, a noticeable migration occurred within the program's listenership. Audiences increasingly gravitated towards daytime broadcasts and more contemporary programming, rendering the overnight slot progressively less central. Consequently, the station manager tentatively proposed that the esteemed host might find a preference for occupying a time slot during peak listening periods, aligning with evolving audience trends. To the astonishment of nearly all involved, the host politely yet firmly declined the proposed career advancement. He articulated a distinct preference for the serene intimacy afforded by the nocturnal hours and the profound, unique rapport he had meticulously cultivated with those listeners who sought solace during their solitary watches. Yet, over time, a subtle diminution in his unwavering commitment to the program became perceptible, giving the impression that his specific, profound undertaking had reached its natural and complete fruition. In the year 1975, the host formally tendered his resignation, citing his intention to return to his family residing in the tranquil countryside of Greece. His valedictory broadcast was characterized by its elegant simplicity and profound emotional resonance. Comprising a curated anthology of beloved musical selections from the program's distinguished four-year tenure, interspersed with concise, heartfelt reflections on the immense significance of his listeners' unwavering allegiance. He concluded his final transmission with the poignant assertion that the enduring power of music and poetry would continue to bestow solace and ignite inspiration long after the ephemeral presence of any specific radio personality had faded. The radio station subsequently endeavored to secure a successor host for Songs Before Dawn. Yet despite their efforts, no individual proved capable of truly replicating the unique ambiance and profound connection that the original host had so masterfully established. The program persevered for a limited number of additional months, but was ultimately supplanted by more standard and conventional late-night broadcast content. Even many years subsequent, individuals who had once tuned into Songs Before Dawn would consistently recount the profound significance the program held for them during that challenging era. Numerous testimonials attested that the host's comforting vocal delivery and meticulously curated musical repertoire had been instrumental in preserving their intrinsic sense of Greek identity and fostering a resilient hope for more propitious days, particularly when both cultural heritage and optimism felt gravely imperiled. Furthermore, a contingent of long-devoted listeners would occasionally assert that on specific, exceptionally clear evenings, when atmospheric phenomena aligned perfectly, they could still, at times, discern fleeting fragments of familiar melodies and that distinctly warm, reassuring voice, seemingly wafting across the airwaves from an indeterminate, distant broadcasting point. Regardless of whether this phenomenon was a product of vivid recollection, fervent imagination, or some altogether different occurrence, it served as an enduring testament that the finest elements of Greek culture, the evocative music, the timeless poetry, and the indomitable spirit of community that the host had so passionately championed, remained as robust and vibrant as ever. It is perhaps a profound truth that the most exquisitely impactful broadcasts are not those that vociferously proclaim their messages, but rather those that tenderly impart their wisdom to individuals navigating the profound quietude of the night. They serve as a gentle, persistent affirmation that the breaking of a new day is an inevitability, that the enduring essence of culture will invariably outlive the transient machinations of political power, and that even amidst the most profound and isolating moments, humanity remains inextricably linked by empathetic voices that intuitively comprehend both our deepest tribulations and our most fervent aspirations. Athena at the library, the girl who hid books from the junta. The compelling influence of resonant voices, capable of transmitting profound wisdom through the deepest shadows, now guides our narrative to a distinct account originating from those identical, tumultuous years. This particular chronicle centers on a remarkably astute teenage girl whose unassuming intellect played a pivotal role in safeguarding invaluable knowledge at a time when governmental authorities made concerted efforts to dictate and restrict the intellectual consumption and cognitive processes of the populace. One would invariably have encountered her each afternoon, following the conclusion of her scholastic obligations within the cavernous basement of the Athens Municipal Library. She was a solemn 15-year-old, Sophia Stratego by name, whose prominent spectacles and meticulously composed bearing rendered her almost imperceptible amidst the towering arrays of literary volumes and overflowing filing cabinets, an unassuming presence in a realm of stored information. Sophia's father held the distinguished profession of a librarian, while her mother dedicated herself to teaching at the primary school level. Consequently, Sophia herself had been nurtured in an environment where books were as ubiquitous and familiar as toys might be to other children. When the military junta in the year 1972, initiated a more stringent imposition of its authority over the realms of education and publishing. The library became the recipient of progressively more frequent visitations from government functionaries, who arrived bearing extensive inventories of prescribed books, magazines, and various periodical publications. Any publication deemed to be politically seditious, ethically dubious, or in opposition to the regime's officially sanctioned interpretation of Greek societal values was mandated for immediate withdrawal from public access. Sophia observed with a heavy heart as her father, with palpable reluctance, meticulously packed away volumes he had dedicated years to painstakingly cataloging and judiciously acquiring. Esteemed philosophical treatises, incisive political commentaries, cutting-edge modern literary works, and historical chronicles that diverged from the authorized governmental narratives, each category systematically vanished from the accessible public shelves. Consequently, the library's atmosphere transformed, becoming palpably hushed and considerably less intellectually stimulating, as its regular patrons discovered a stark reduction in intriguing materials suitable for academic inquiry and recreational perusal. However, Sophia, with her perceptive intellect, discerned a crucial oversight that had eluded the government functionaries. The extensive subterranean levels of the library housed capacious storage zones, utilitarian maintenance chambers, and numerous overlooked nooks and crannies where acquisitions spanning several decades reposed in various states of cataloging and organizational limbo. These particular subterranean zones were characterized by pervasive dust, inadequate illumination, and were, as a rule, assiduously shunned, save for the execution of essential upkeep responsibilities. Rather than passively permitting the prescribed literary works to face destruction or complete expatriation from the premises, Sophia embarked upon the clandestine creation of what she privately termed the alternative collection. Diligently working beyond her regular school hours and throughout the weekends, she painstakingly relocated the prohibited literary assets to ingeniously conceived, secure concealment spots distributed throughout the vast basement. In so doing, she meticulously constructed a covert shadow library, thereby safeguarding invaluable intellectual resources for the benefit of future generations. Her clandestine operations were underpinned by an astonishingly intricate framework, especially considering she was merely a teenager acting in solitude. She meticulously crafted encrypted inventory documents, ingeniously disguised as mundane maintenance logs. These records cataloged the hidden intellectual treasures using a sophisticated system of reference numbers that, to a casual observer, appeared to be prosaic identifiers for heating apparatus, electrical components, and general building upkeep items. Only Sophia possessed the key to decipher this elaborate code. For instance, the notation Heating Unit 347 was, in her secret lexicon, a precise locator for a collection of pivotal political philosophy texts, carefully secreted away behind the building's formidable main furnace. This intricate system was a testament to her foresight and organizational prowess. The execution of Sophia's ambitious undertaking demanded both scrupulous foresight and unyielding secrecy. To evade detection, she adopted a gradual, almost imperceptible method, moving the precious volumes in small, manageable quantities, a few at a time, to avoid arousing any suspicion from staff or authorities. Furthermore, she faced the formidable challenge of identifying and securing concealment spots that would withstand not only incidental discovery by a curious cleaner, but also the rigorous scrutiny of a systematic, politically motivated search. Crucially, she was compelled to maintain an outwardly ordinary demeanor and an unblemished pattern of behavior, ensuring that no flicker of suspicion would ever illuminate her surreptitious preservation endeavors. Remarkably, her scholastic achievements experienced an upward trajectory during this demanding period, a phenomenon not despite the additional responsibilities, but directly attributable to them. The intricate management of her clandestine collection compelled her to cultivate highly advanced organizational proficiencies, immerse herself in a diverse array of academic disciplines, and master complex methodologies of information stewardship. Her educators frequently lauded her diligent commitment to her library duties, remaining entirely oblivious to the profound, practical education she was truly acquiring during the quiet, solitary hours spent toiling in the library's subterranean depths. Among the myriad challenges Sophia encountered, the most intellectually demanding was the critical decision of prioritizing which materials warranted preservation. The physical constraints of available space were severely limited, and the imperative of security was paramount, overriding almost all other concerns. Consequently, she bore the weighty responsibility of discerning which particular volumes would prove most invaluable to future generations of scholars and avid readers. This formidable task necessitated the development of an exceptionally refined discernment regarding intellectual merit and profound historical resonance, a judgment far beyond her years. Her strategic selection process commenced with seminal works of philosophy and political theory, recognizing their irreplaceable nature and foundational importance. Subsequently, she expanded her collection to include literary masterpieces that embodied significant cultural perspectives and emotional depth, alongside scientific treatises deemed potentially crucial for groundbreaking future research. She also prioritized historical documents that offered alternative, often suppressed, narratives, thereby challenging official governmental accounts of events. Each meticulously assembled, hidden collection thus transformed into a carefully curated bastion of intellectual liberty, standing as a defiant bulwark against the suffocating tide of political oppression. As time progressed, Sophia forged discreet connections with university students and faculty members who were increasingly grappling with the severe constriction of research resources. While she could not overtly grant access to the prescribed materials, she ingeniously began to offer subtle, veiled guidance on alternative research methodologies and innovative bibliographical strategies. These quiet interventions proved instrumental in enabling serious scholars to persist in their academic pursuits despite the stringent official restrictions. Professor Janis Kenos, a distinguished classicist at the University of Athens, later reminisced about his interactions with a remarkably astute teenage library assistant. He recalled how she seemed to possess an intuitive grasp of research exigencies that often surpassed that of many seasoned professional librarians. Sophia would attentively absorb his research predicaments and, with an uncanny knack, would then suggest approaches or resources that consistently proved unexpectedly beneficial. Her assistance was invariably circuitous and meticulously crafted to appear entirely plausible. She might, for instance, casually remark that certain older translations contained interpretive nuances absent from contemporary editions, or subtly intimate that a comprehensive comparative analysis might necessitate examining sources predating recent editorial revisions. Consequently, discerning scholars learned to attach significant weight to Sophia's seemingly casual observations concerning research methodology. The clandestine collection experienced a gradual yet consistent expansion throughout the years 1972 and 1973. Sophia's secluded basement sanctuary progressively transformed into a secret repository, a vibrant testament to intellectual freedom, meticulously safeguarded by one resolute teenager. She harbored a profound understanding that knowledge, once extinguished, could prove irrevocably lost. Her monumental undertaking was conducted in absolute solitude. She steadfastly refrained from enlisting any assistance, fearing that even an accidental disclosure by a well-meaning helper could jeopardize the entire precarious security of her operation. Her most audacious decision materialized when government authorities publicly announced a sweeping, comprehensive review of all library holdings, encompassing every storage area and basement collection. Sophia immediately grasped the perilous implication. Even her most ingeniously concealed materials were now vulnerable to discovery during such a systematic and thorough examination. A more impenetrable preservation method became an urgent necessity. Leveraging the sophisticated organizational and technical proficiencies she had honed through managing the hidden collection, Sophia embarked on the ambitious task of microfilming the most critically important materials. The library's existing microfilm equipment was primarily designated for the preservation of newspapers and historical documents, yet she ingeniously secured access during off hours by volunteering her time to assist with routine preservation endeavors. The undeniable advantage of her burgeoning microfilm collection was its capacity for storage in significantly smaller, more easily camouflaged spaces, rendering it far more effectively hidden than the bulky physical books. The much-anticipated comprehensive review commenced in early 1974, with government officials initiating exhaustive searches of areas that had, until then, remained untouched by systematic examination. Sophia, her nerves taut, observed the inspectors as they meticulously scoured storage rooms, maintenance areas, and forgotten nooks where less critical hidden materials had been placed. Indeed, some items were regrettably discovered and subsequently confiscated. However, Sophia's most ingeniously designed and sophisticated hiding places remained inviolable, successfully eluding detection. More significantly, her meticulously compiled microfilm collection served as an invaluable safeguard, preserving the intellectual content of those very materials that were physically unearthed and removed. Thus, the essence of knowledge itself endured, even when individual books were irrevocably destroyed. As political tensions escalated throughout 1974 and the military junta's iron grip began to perceptibly falter, Sophia found herself in an unforeseen and strategically crucial position. She had assiduously preserved a wealth of materials that would prove indispensable for comprehending the profound impact of the period of censorship and, crucially, for the arduous process of re-establishing intellectual freedom once the oppressive political restrictions were finally dismantled. Her teenage project, initially a clandestine act of resistance, had inadvertently evolved into an invaluable historical archive. Upon the ultimate collapse of the military government in 1974, Sophia confronted the intricate challenge of progressively reintroducing the hidden materials into public circulation, all while scrupulously concealing the full extent of her audacious preservation activities. She was acutely aware of the necessity to avoid attracting any official scrutiny that could potentially imperil her family or the library administration. Her chosen solution was characteristically methodical and imbued with immense patience. Over the ensuing months, previously banned materials began to subtly reappear within the library's collection, creating the impression that they had merely been misplaced during routine organizational tasks, rather than deliberately secreted away for profound political reasons. Sophia's meticulous documentation proved invaluable, enabling her to gradually restore these materials without provoking any suspicion regarding a systematic, politically motivated preservation effort. University researchers soon began to observe that the Athens Municipal Library appeared to possess remarkably comprehensive collections of materials that were conspicuously absent or exceedingly difficult to locate elsewhere. Scholars who had grappled with severely constrained resources during the oppressive junta years discovered, to their profound relief, that their research could now resume with access to sources they had long presumed permanently lost. Sophia, however, maintained an unwavering silence regarding her extraordinary preservation activities. Even after the restoration of political freedom, she continued her dedicated work at the library throughout her university years, eventually ascending to the esteemed position of a professional librarian whose profound expertise in information management and collection preservation was widely respected, though its true origins and full scope remained an unspoken enigma. Decades subsequently, when diligent researchers studying the tumultuous junta period embarked upon an investigation into precisely how certain invaluable intellectual resources had managed to survive systematic censorship, they uncovered compelling evidence of highly sophisticated preservation efforts. These efforts clearly pointed towards extensive planning and the application of truly remarkable organizational acumen. However, the precise identity of the individual or individuals who had orchestrated these clandestine activities remained an enduring mystery. Sophia, by then the esteemed head librarian, would occasionally permit herself a subtle smile when younger colleagues expressed their awe at the library's exceptionally rich historical collections, and mused aloud about how such a wealth of material had endured such a challenging era. She would simply offer the profound observation that books, much like resilient ideas, were far more difficult to obliterate than authorities typically comprehended, and that determined individuals could always devise ingenious methods to safeguard that which held the most profound significance. Her lasting legacy extended far beyond the mere physical materials she preserved. It encompassed the profound understanding she cultivated regarding the inextricable link between knowledge and freedom. She had come to grasp that intellectual liberty demanded not merely unfettered access to information, but also the active, courageous protection of that access by individuals willing to undertake significant personal risks for the greater collective good. Perhaps, she implicitly understood, the most profoundly important libraries are not those distinguished by the grandest architectural edifices or the most expansive public collections, but rather those quietly nurtured and maintained by individuals who intuitively grasp that the preservation of knowledge is, at times, a quiet yet potent act of resistance, and that the sagest guardians of intellectual freedom are often those who operate unseen, laboring diligently in the shadows, ensuring that truth perseveres until it can safely emerge into the illuminating embrace of the light. This narrative of quiet heroism, dedicated to preserving knowledge in perilous times, now transports us to an earlier epoch in Greek history, a period demanding a different, yet equally profound, brand of courage during the Great War. In the treacherous, muddy trenches of the Macedonian front in 1917, there served a soldier named Sergeant Polemos, whose approach to the brutal realities of warfare was utterly unlike anything his battle-hardened comrades had ever witnessed. One would have invariably discovered him during the biting winter months, not ensconced in the officers' quarters, where a degree of warmth and comfort might be anticipated, but rather steadfastly sharing the coldest, most exposed positions with the rawest recruits and the most visibly frightened conscripts. Polomos, despite being considerably older than the majority of his fellow soldiers, had voluntarily enlisted for military service, asserting a deep-seated personal responsibility to defend Greek territory against the scourge of foreign occupation. His surname, Polomos, meaning war in ancient Greek, often elicited a wry amusement among his comrades, yet his actual conduct in the throes of combat frequently bewildered them. Polomos was utterly fearless, even under the most intense enemy fire, seemed to anticipate hostile movements with an almost uncanny accuracy, and possessed an extraordinary, almost miraculous, ability to keep his men alive in situations that appeared utterly hopeless. Yet, despite his formidable combat prowess, he derived no discernible satisfaction from killing, and consistently demonstrated an unusual, almost startling respect for enemy soldiers, even those actively endeavoring to take his life. The relentless pursuit of survival against those determined to end his life defined his existence. The grim reality of the trenches along the Macedonian front presented an agonizing nightmare, characterized by pervasive mud, rampant disease, soul-crushing boredom, and the ever-present specter of sudden, brutal terror. Within these desolate confines, countless men met their demise from the relentless onslaught of artillery bombardments, the chilling precision of sniper fire, the insidious spread of poison gas, and virulent infections that propagated with alarming speed amidst the appallingly unsanitary conditions. The collective morale of the troops remained a perpetually fragile entity, demanding an unceasing application of discipline and reinforcement. Ultimately, an individual's continued survival was predominantly a precarious balance of sheer chance and the demonstrable competence of their immediate military leaders. Polomos ascended to the rank of sergeant, not by virtue of advantageous political connections or through the conventional channels of formal military training, but rather because his fellow soldiers instinctively gravitated toward and obeyed his command during moments of acute crisis. In the face of enemy assaults, he displayed an uncanny prescience, appearing to possess an exact understanding of optimal troop placement for paramount protection. When vital supply lines faltered or were severed, he ingeniously devised methods to ensure his unit remained adequately provisioned and equipped. Furthermore, in the dire absence of conventional medical support, his profound grasp of field medicine proved instrumental, preserving lives that would otherwise have been tragically forfeited. What truly distinguished his leadership was his profoundly singular perspective on the nature of combat itself. While the majority of highly effective military commanders typically cultivated an emotional disengagement from the brutal realities of violence, or learned to skillfully redirect their ire and belligerence into strategic assets, Polomos, by contrast, appeared to comprehend warfare as a lamentable, yet unavoidable exigency. This understanding mandated the utmost degree of proficiency, precisely because the ramifications of any misstep or inadequacy were so utterly catastrophic. Private Stavros Demetrio, a soldier who served under Sergeant Polomos for a period of 8 months, subsequently penned in his personal diary, "The sergeant engages in battle with the demeanor of a man who has witnessed every conceivable manifestation of warfare and has come to the profound realization that the sole victory truly worthy of attainment is one that exacts the minimal toll in lives on both sides of the conflict. He dispatches foes when absolutely imperative, yet never with malice or animosity. And he perpetually exposes himself to peril to safeguard those soldiers who have not yet acquired the crucial wisdom of self-preservation. Sergeant Palomos exhibited an exceptionally distinctive relationship with the intricate tactical dimensions of trench warfare. His comprehension of the topographical features, meteorological conditions, and the psychological nuances of the adversary appeared to stem from a profound and extensive wellspring of experience. Despite official military documentation indicating no prior history of combat service, his remarkable aptitude for anticipating artillery trajectories, discerning vulnerabilities within enemy emplacements, and orchestrating sophisticated defensive maneuvers strongly suggested a level of professional training that far surpassed his officially recorded background. During the intermittent lulls between significant military engagements, a time when the majority of soldiers typically occupied themselves with drafting correspondence to loved ones, engaging in games of chance, or seeking out fleeting diversions, Palomos would instead circulate among his men, meticulously assessing their physical well-being and emotional states. He seemed to possess an innate understanding that the efficacy of military units hinged not solely on tactical prowess and individual bravery, but equally, if not more so, on diligent attention to morale, collective health, and the robust cohesion of the group. His methodology for enforcing discipline was notably potent. Rather than resorting to conventional punitive measures or coercive intimidation, Palomos fostered order and obedience primarily through the compelling force of his personal conduct and an authentic, palpable solicitude for the welfare of his soldiers. Consequently, his men adhered to his directives not out of fear, but because they implicitly trusted his discernment and were acutely aware that he would never command them to undertake perils he himself was unwilling to confront. The quintessential demonstration of his exceptional leadership capabilities manifested during the pivotal autumn offensive of 1917. On this occasion, Greek forces received explicit directives to advance against formidable, heavily fortified enemy emplacements, notwithstanding a glaring deficiency in artillery support and a critical shortage of reserves. It was patently obvious that the proposed assault was ill-conceived and destined to incur an exorbitant toll in human lives for a negligible strategic advantage. Instead of merely adhering to commands that promised an inevitable and needless butchery, Palomos dedicated the entire night preceding the offensive to an exhaustive examination of terrain maps, a meticulous analysis of enemy defensive schematics, and the painstaking development of alternative tactical stratagems. He subsequently put forth a revised assault blueprint that not only accomplished the identical strategic aims, but also drastically curtailed potential casualties by shrewdly capitalizing on vulnerabilities within the enemy's positions that had eluded the scrutiny of higher command. This refined plan demanded an extraordinary degree of precision and synchronized cooperation across disparate units. Yet Palomos had cultivated such profound trust and seamless communication among his troops that they were able to flawlessly execute these intricate maneuvers amidst the chaos of active combat. The operation culminated in resounding success, with casualty figures dramatically lower than those projected by the original scheme. And notably, several key strategic locations were seized that had not even been encompassed within the initial operational objectives. Military authorities, predictably, harbored initial reservations regarding tactical innovations that deviated from officially sanctioned protocols. However, the unequivocal and impressive outcomes rendered such skepticism untenable. Polemos was subsequently bestowed with commendations for his exemplary leadership and presented with an offer of promotion to officer rank, an offer he respectfully and unostentatiously declined. Articulating his preference for direct engagement with enlisted soldiers over the administrative responsibilities inherent in headquarters-based management roles. With the relentless approach of winter and the concomitant escalation of hostilities, Polomos's military contingent garnered widespread recognition throughout their operational sector for its exceptionally elevated survival rates, its consistently effective combat performance, and its conspicuously high morale. Notwithstanding the severely arduous environmental conditions, a growing number of soldiers from adjacent units initiated requests for transfers, seeking to serve directly under his command. Concurrently, even senior officers began routinely soliciting his counsel regarding complex tactical dilemmas that defied resolution through adherence to conventional military doctrine. His distinguished reputation, moreover, transcended the confines of his own national army. Adversary soldiers apprehended during reconnaissance missions or skirmishes frequently made mention of the distinctive Greek unit that engaged in battle with extraordinary proficiency, yet simultaneously accorded prisoners of war an unanticipated level of dignity. Several captured enemy officers openly conveyed their bewilderment at confronting adversaries who appeared to possess a more profound and nuanced grasp of military strategy and execution than their own seasoned professional military commanders. In the concluding months of the protracted conflict, as the prevailing military stalemate gradually gave way to diplomatic negotiations and the eventual declaration of an armistice, Polomos judiciously commenced the crucial task of readying his soldiers for their arduous reintegration into civilian society. He possessed a prescient understanding that individuals who had endured extended periods of intense combat were invariably confronted with profound psychological challenges, issues that the broader military establishment was only then beginning to acknowledge and comprehend. To address these nascent concerns, he meticulously orchestrated informal forums for discussion, enabling his men to openly process and cope with their indelible war memories. Furthermore, he actively assisted them in formulating strategies for economic adaptation in the aftermath of their military service and assiduously championed the continuation of the vital mutual support relationships forged amidst the crucible of battle. His foresightful and comprehensive post-war preparedness proved to be every bit as sagacious and efficacious as his celebrated combat leadership had consistently demonstrated. Upon the ultimate proclamation of peace and the subsequent initiation of demobilization procedures, Polomos, with an almost ethereal abruptness, vanished from public sight, mirroring the suddenness of his initial emergence. Official military archives confirmed the diligent fulfillment of his service obligations and his formal discharge from the armed forces. Nevertheless, all subsequent endeavors to ascertain his whereabouts for purposes such as veterans' benefits or regimental reunions proved entirely fruitless. He appeared to have simply dissolved seamlessly and without trace into the vast expanse of the civilian populace. His former comrades in arms, however, diligently sustained their mutual contact and periodically converged to reminisce about their shared wartime tribulations. Invariably, they would raise a toast to Sergeant Polomos, wherever he might be, and recount myriad anecdotes illuminating his truly exceptional leadership. A significant number of these veterans unequivocally attributed their continued existence, both physically and psychologically, to his guidance during one of the most profoundly challenging epochs in the annals of modern Greek history. Many decades subsequent to the cessation of hostilities, military historians engrossed in the study of the Great War era unearthed compelling evidence of tactical innovations and leadership methodologies that appeared astonishingly progressive for their historical context. The Macedonian front, in particular, had evidently functioned as an experimental crucible, a veritable laboratory for the gestation of military techniques that would not be formally integrated into standard doctrine until significantly later conflicts. A segment of scholarly researchers posited that specific Greek military units had attained success quotients that markedly surpassed what would have been deemed feasible, considering their available resources and overarching strategic predicament. These perplexing, unexplained triumphs invariably seemed to coalesce around particular commanders whose documented backgrounds and formal training bore little congruence with their manifest and profound expertise. Veterans of the arduous Macedonian campaign, when interviewed in the twilight of their lives, consistently recounted tales of leaders who had seamlessly melded conventional bravery with an unanticipated, profound sagacity, approaching warfare not as an act of aggression, but as a somber, tragic responsibility demanding the apex of strategic skill and rigorous ethical deliberation. They frequently articulated a vision of commanders who grasped that authentic military might derived from the preservation of human lives, rather than the mere act of extinguishing them. It is perhaps plausible that the most formidable warriors are not those who harbor an affinity for battle, but rather those who comprehend its intricacies so utterly that they can minimize its inherent human and material costs while still attaining indispensable objectives. Conceivably, the most sublime dimension of military leadership resides in the astute discernment of when violence becomes truly unavoidable, the judicious application of such force with maximal efficacy, and the unwavering commitment to safeguarding the inherent humanity of all participants, even extending to the adversary. In this profound sense, the very deity of war occasionally serves its purpose most effectively by imparting upon mortals the crucial lessons of how to wage conflict with both consummate skill and profound compassion. This profound wisdom, centered on the preservation of existence through sagacious comprehension, now guides our narrative toward an altogether distinct tale of survival. Our focus shifts this time to the sun-drenched, parched hills of Crete, set against the backdrop of the devastating drought that gripped the island in 1993. Nestled within a quaint village perched serenely above the azure expanse of the Aegean Sea, resided a vintner by the name of Giannis Alergos. His vineyard, against all odds, continued to thrive with an inexplicable vitality, even as adjacent agricultural enterprises wilted and succumbed beneath the merciless, unyielding Mediterranean sun. One would invariably discover him each morning at the break of dawn, traversing with deliberate pace through the meticulously arranged rows of grapevines, plants that, by all conventional indicators, ought to have been exhibiting signs of severe stress and acute struggle. He inspected every single plant with the assiduous concentration of an individual who comprehended, at a fundamental level, that continued viability was contingent upon the keen observation of the most minute particulars. Giannis had received the vineyard as an ancestral legacy from his grandfather. However, his distinctive methodology for cultivating grapes appeared to seamlessly integrate time-honored traditional practices with novel, inventive techniques that had evidently never been imparted within the curriculum of any conventional agricultural institution. The relentless dry spell commenced its grip in the nascent stages of spring and persisted with unyielding intensity, month after arduous month, offering no discernible respite. Throughout the entirety of the island, other viticultural establishments witnessed their grapevines succumbing to severe duress, their precious fruit shriveling into insignificance, and their once promising harvests dwindling to a mere fraction of their potential. In their profound desperation, neighboring agriculturists resorted to costly measures, excavating deeper wells and installing elaborate irrigation apparatuses, only to observe with a crushing sense of helplessness as their substantial financial outlays proved utterly ineffectual in salvaging crops that were perishing at a rate far exceeding the speed at which water could be supplied. Yet, in stark and puzzling contrast, Giannis's vineyard inexplicably retained its robust vitality. His particular varietals displayed absolutely none of the characteristic indicators of drought-induced distress. There were no telltale yellowing leaves, no signs of stunted development, and no discernible reduction in the prolificacy of fruit production. Indeed, visitors who ambled through his thriving estate found it genuinely challenging to reconcile what they observed with the pervasive, harsh climatic realities that were simultaneously wreaking havoc upon the agricultural sector across the entire region. Maria Papadakis, the region's dedicated agricultural extension agent, routinely embarked on inspections, fully expecting to uncover evidence of sophisticated water conservation techniques or remarkably fertile land. Instead, her investigations consistently unveiled a vineyard operating on tenets entirely beyond the scope of established agricultural methodologies or scientific comprehension. While Giannis graciously entertained her inquiries, his responses proved exasperatingly imprecise. He frequently expounded upon the necessity of heeding the vine's inherent requirements and harmonizing with nature's intrinsic cadences, rather than furnishing precise specifications regarding irrigation timetables, nutrient enrichment protocols, or pest control measures. When pressed for more concrete information, he would simply offer a warm smile, proposing that the art of cultivating grapes successfully demanded a profound intuitive sense, as much as it did empirical expertise. During her subsequent visits, Maria discerned that the vineyard's operations were characterized by an exceptional meticulousness concerning minute environmental elements, aspects typically overlooked or entirely unappreciated by the majority of cultivators. Giannis appeared to possess an innate comprehension of the distinct microclimates existing across his landholding, meticulously tailoring his horticultural approaches for specific zones, adapting to subtle shifts in soil exposure and atmospheric currents that were almost imperceptible to external observers. His operational timetable diverged significantly from conventional agricultural guidelines. Occasionally, he would engage in strenuous labor during the cooler hours of twilight, reserving periods of repose for daylight segments when his peers were typically at their most industrious. His judicious orchestration of diverse vineyard activities, such as trimming, tilling, and preparing for the grape harvest, evidently stemmed from influences far surpassing mere meteorological predictions or calendrical designations. The social milieu surrounding the vineyard proved to be as distinctive as its remarkable agricultural achievements. Even amidst the profound strain that persistent drought conditions inflicted upon the majority of agrarian communities, Giannis's estate blossomed into a vital nexus, a spontaneous assembly point where local residents discovered compelling motives to call, lend assistance with an array of chores, and partake in communal meals that, through some inexplicable grace, perpetually expanded to welcome all who materialized at the table. These impromptu congregations were never formally scheduled, yet they recurred with dependable frequency across the entirety of the cultivation period. Individuals would arrive, seeking to deliberate over their farming dilemmas, solicit counsel regarding their own faltering harvests, or simply to find momentary respite from the pervasive apprehension that financial adversity was sowing across the entire district. Giannis possessed an extraordinary aptitude for assisting his guests in unwinding and gaining a broader outlook on their predicaments. Dialogues at his vineyard frequently ascended to a philosophical plane, delving into profound inquiries concerning the intrinsic bond between humankind and the natural world, the profound significance embedded within ancestral farming methods, and the spiritual dimensions inherent in cultivating sustenance. Attendees departed these exchanges feeling revitalized and imbued with optimism, notwithstanding the persistent practical obstacles they faced. Father Costas, the venerated village priest, observed a palpable restoration of composure among families grappling with drought-induced stress after they had spent time within the tranquil confines of Giannis's vineyard. These dynamic exchanges, communal repasts, and cooperative endeavors collectively forged a formidable bedrock of community solidarity, furnishing individuals with the resilience necessary to navigate the complexities of financial instability and environmental adversities. As the debilitating drought persisted, extending its grip into a second consecutive year, the stark dichotomy between Giannis's flourishing vineyard and the beleaguered agricultural estates adjacent to it grew increasingly pronounced and poignant. Consequently, agricultural authorities initiated a more rigorous and systematic examination of Giannis's operational methodologies, nurturing aspirations of discerning replicable strategies that might be disseminated among other cultivators confronting comparable predicaments. Their meticulous inquiries, however, yielded results that were intriguing yet ultimately inconclusive. Analysis of the soil indicated a commendable mineral composition, though it presented no extraordinary characteristics when juxtaposed with adjacent land parcels. Furthermore, observations suggested that water consumption was remarkably below the regional average, rather than exceeding it, a finding which failed to elucidate the vineyard's evident superior vitality. Even sophisticated meteorological surveillance apparatus registered no anomalous microclimatic phenomena that could satisfactorily explain the distinctly favorable cultivation conditions. The paramount distinction, it appeared, resided within vineyard management methodologies that proved inherently challenging to numerically assess or systematically reproduce. Giannis's astute decisions regarding operational timing, his distinctive philosophies concerning vine nourishment, and his innovative techniques for fostering soil vitality represented a harmonious synthesis of ancestral wisdom and groundbreaking adaptations, seemingly originating from an unparalleled grasp of botanical physiology and ecological dynamics. His commentaries persistently maintained their exasperatingly non-technical character. When interrogated about his water conservation approach, he might poetically articulate that he endeavored to foster a more profound, symbiotic connection between the vines and the earth beneath them. Upon being questioned regarding his unconventional trimming procedures, he would elucidate that his objective was to empower each individual plant to discover its intrinsic robustness, rather than imposing artificial growth paradigms. Notwithstanding the elusive nature of his explanations, fellow agriculturists commenced integrating components of Giannis's distinctive methodology, discovering that even a fractional incorporation yielded discernible enhancements in their outcomes. His steadfast advocacy for meticulous scrutiny, adaptable scheduling, and an overarching, comprehensive philosophy toward vineyard stewardship significantly assisted neighboring cultivators in formulating more efficacious strategies for confronting the persistent drought. The vineyard's yield during the second year of the arid spell was not merely bountiful, but truly outstanding in its intrinsic quality. At a time when the majority of viticultural output across the region suffered severe curtailment, Giannis cultivated grapes that subsequently fermented into wines possessing extraordinary profundity and intricate character. Consequently, discerning wine purveyors from the metropolis of Athens initiated dedicated journeys to acquire his remarkably finite production. This burgeoning triumph, however, simultaneously engendered a fresh array of impediments, as heightened scrutiny attracted a greater influx of visitors, a proliferation of queries, and intensified demands to elucidate or commercially leverage his distinctive methodologies. Giannis navigated this burgeoning prominence with his customary poise and inherent dignity, extending a warm reception to earnest seekers of knowledge while adeptly parrying endeavors to capitalize upon or unduly dramatize his accomplishments. With the advent of the third year, marked by the unyielding persistence of arid conditions, regional governance bodies formally requested Giannis to conduct instructional seminars for fellow cultivators, grappling with climatically induced adversities. His instructional sessions, while widely acclaimed, were decidedly unorthodox, emphasizing the cultivation of an instinctual comprehension of agrarian ecosystems rather than the rote application of discrete technological remedies. Attendees of these workshops frequently perceived his counsel as arduous to put into practice, primarily because it necessitated the forging of intimate connections with their land and produce, diverging sharply from the adherence to standardized operational protocols. Nevertheless, those agriculturists who dedicated effort to embracing this methodology typically witnessed ameliorated outcomes, even if they remained incapable of fully articulating the precise rationale behind their adapted practices' superior efficacy. Upon the eventual reinstatement of customary precipitation regimes, Giannis's vineyard seamlessly adapted to the altered environmental circumstances, preserving its robust vitality and prolific output. In stark contrast to numerous other agricultural enterprises that contended arduously to recuperate from the ravages of prolonged aridity, his exemplary model had been instrumental in solidifying novel paradigms for enduring agricultural practices, strategies that demonstrated their worth far beyond the immediate exigencies of the crisis. The vineyard steadfastly retained its pivotal function as a regional fount for agrarian instruction and a cherished communal rendezvous point. Giannis matured with an inherent dignity, ultimately entrusting the superintendence of the vineyard to a nephew who had assimilated his distinctive techniques over an extended period of diligent observation and practical application, rather than through conventional didactic instruction. Academic agricultural researchers persisted in their scrutiny of the estate for many subsequent years, meticulously cataloging advancements in sustainable cultivation that appeared to presage climatic difficulties long before they evolved into pervasive global anxieties. The vineyard consequently solidified its standing as an archetype for methodologies that proficiently integrated time-honored sagacity with agile, responsive management paradigms. Frequenters consistently commented upon the estate's singular ambiance, a pervasive sensation of plenitude and festivity, even amid periods of considerable hardship, almost as if the vineyard itself harbored an intrinsic recollection of a profound truth concerning the intricate interplay between human endeavor and nature's munificence. Guests experienced a profound sense of inclusion, not merely as patrons or pupils, but as active contributors to an enduring tribute to the indomitable spirit of life. It might be posited that the most precious yields are not invariably those physically gathered, but rather the robust communities nurtured and the profound sagacity disseminated during eras of adversity. Perchance the most exceptional vintages arise not solely from flawless fruit, but from an intrinsic comprehension that prosperity can indeed manifest even within arduous cultivation periods, and that the act of sharing one's endowments invariably amplifies them, rather than diminishing the blessings bestowed. Occasionally, the deity associated with viticulture and revelry imparts lessons most potently not through boisterous festivities, but through deliberate, enduring exemplifications of how felicity can blossom, even when circumstances appear utterly insurmountable. Demetra's Garden: How a Village Fought Famine in 1947. The profound precept of cultivating prosperity through sagacity and communal distribution now directs attention to one of Greece's most arduous epochs, immediately succeeding the cessation of the Second World War, but prior to the genuine commencement of national recuperation. In the year 1947, the nation continued to contend with pervasive food scarcity, profound economic disintegration, and the extensive societal disarray that had ensued from prolonged years of foreign subjugation and internal strife. Within a secluded, diminutive mountainous hamlet known as Spetses resided a woman named Dimitra Karpou, whose unassuming garden plot subsequently evolved into the cornerstone of a remarkable undertaking in collective endurance. One would typically observe her at the first blush of dawn each morning, assiduously cultivating a parcel of earth that appeared to defy all conventional expectations of fertility, yielding an almost miraculous bounty. Notwithstanding the intractable rocky terrain and the unforgiving mountain atmospheric conditions, Dimitra had journeyed back to her ancestral village following the tragic loss of both her spouse and her residence in Athens amidst the wartime devastation. She arrived possessing naught but the profound agrarian wisdom inherited from her grandmother, and an unyielding resolve to generate sustenance from any and all accessible provisions. From the very limited provisions that could be accessed, a narrative of resilience and ingenuity emerged. Upon her arrival, the village found itself in a truly dire predicament. A significant portion of its younger male inhabitants had either perished in the recent conflict or had departed in pursuit of employment opportunities elsewhere. The remaining households comprised predominantly elderly individuals, widows, and children, all grappling with survival amidst scarce resources and agricultural lands scarred by neglect. Conventional farming practices were proving wholly inadequate, failing to generate sufficient sustenance to meet even the most fundamental dietary requirements. Dimitra commenced her efforts on a modest parcel of land situated behind the derelict dwelling she had inherited from her kin. The earth there was impoverished, riddled with stones, and utterly depleted after enduring years of abandonment. Most villagers harbored the conviction that serious cultivation was an impossibility under such harsh circumstances, and consequently, they channeled their meager energies into foraging, tending to small livestock, and seeking whatever meager assistance might be forthcoming from various relief organizations. Yet, Dimitra confronted this daunting challenge with methodical perseverance and a profound comprehension of the intricate interplay between botanical life, the soil, and climatic conditions. She dedicated several weeks solely to scrutinizing the terrain, meticulously charting drainage patterns, identifying zones where wild flora thrived, and pinpointing localized microclimates that might support a diverse array of crops. Her neighbors, observing her patient diligence, considered her to be squandering valuable time that ought to have been allocated to more immediate survival imperatives. Her inaugural innovation involved the creation of compost from materials that everyone else dismissed as utterly worthless refuse. Kitchen remnants, fallen foliage, animal excrement, and even human waste, when properly processed, were all transformed into prospective enrichment for soil that had been deprived of proper nourishment for an extended period. These burgeoning compost piles were scrupulously managed to ensure complete decomposition without inadvertently generating any health hazards. Within her very first cultivation period, Dimitra's diminutive garden began yielding vegetables that were remarkably larger, more robust, and significantly more palatable than anything produced in the region for many years. Her undeniable triumph piqued the curiosity of her neighbors, who soon began posing inquiries about her distinctive methodologies and soliciting guidance concerning their own modest agricultural endeavors. Rather than accumulating her newfound knowledge or attempting to capitalize on her remarkable achievements, Dimitra embarked on a mission to disseminate both information and practical provisions to anyone who demonstrated a genuine desire to learn. She generously offered seeds from her finest specimens, assisted her neighbors in assessing their land's composition, and provided invaluable counsel regarding composting techniques, optimal cultivation timetables, and the selection of suitable varietals for the specific local conditions. Her pedagogical strategy for agricultural education proved exceptionally efficacious. Instead of delivering didactic presentations on abstract principles, she invited individuals to engage in practical work alongside her in the garden. This experiential learning allowed them to grasp directly how different techniques consistently produced varying results. Students could immediately discern the direct relationship between specific farming practices and favorable conclusions. As an increasing number of households began adopting Dimitra's methods, the village's nutritional stability significantly enhanced. Gardens that had previously yielded only meager sustenance harvests began generating abundant produce that could be conserved, exchanged, or shared with families who were still striving to initiate their own food production. These enhanced cultivation practices fostered avenues for a range of secondary commercial pursuits. Women, for instance, commenced processing vegetables and crafting goods that could be successfully sold in regional marketplaces. Children became actively engaged in conserving seeds and nurturing plants, thereby cultivating agrarian competencies while simultaneously contributing to their household sustenance. Elderly villagers, whose traditional knowledge had long been overlooked, found their ancestral farming insights esteemed once more as Dimitra skillfully synthesized old wisdom with new techniques. Dimitra's paramount breakthrough was the establishment of communal gardens, which were cooperatively administered rather than individually owned. Families contributed effort, planting material, and provisions commensurate with their capacities, and everyone shared in the bounty regardless of their specific contributions. This inclusive approach guaranteed that even households without land or resources could access fresh vegetables. The communal garden system necessitated meticulous structuring and social cooperation that had long been absent from the community. Dimitra presided over assemblies where families strategized planting choices, determined work schedules, and planned the equitable allocation of yields. These gatherings evolved into pivotal communal occasions that effectively restored social bonds fractured by conflict and financial adversity. By 1948, the village was not only sufficiently provisioning itself, but also generating excess produce that could be bartered with adjacent settlements for other essential goods. This profound metamorphosis from imminent famine to dietary stability had transpired in fewer than 2 cultivation cycles and had been achieved exclusively through indigenous assets and community endeavors. State functionaries and representatives from humanitarian aid agencies soon commenced touring the village to scrutinize how such a profound amelioration had been achieved with negligible external intervention. They discerned a populace that had developed refined farming methodologies, potent communal collaboration, and viable fiscal approaches that could be readily transferred to other distressed regions. Dimitra's articulations consistently underscored pragmatic teamwork and diligent scrutiny, rather than any groundbreaking methodologies or unique provisions. She firmly asserted that their success stemmed from the methodical application of ancestral wisdom, the judicious allocation of assets, and the unwavering communal dedication to reciprocal aid during periods of adversity. The village consequently evolved into a pedagogical hub where delegates from diverse localities could acquire cultivation and management practices that had demonstrated efficacy under arduous environments. Dimitra and other seasoned residents imparted instruction that skillfully amalgamated technical specifics with tenets of collective endeavor and communal governance. As Greece's wider national financial resurgence commenced, the village found itself strategically situated to capitalize on emerging prospects because of the bedrock of nutritional stability and communal structuring that had been forged during the exigency period. Excess farm produce could be channeled into alternative commercial undertakings, and the ingrained patterns of collaboration greatly facilitated the orchestration of joint ventures. Dimitra persisted with her farming endeavors, but progressively redirected her attention toward codifying and instructing the methodologies forged during the emergency period. She recognized the imperative that the knowledge and social systems they had created needed to be safeguarded for posterity, for future communities confronting comparable predicaments. Her notebooks consequently became precious references for agrarian outreach initiatives and grassroots enhancement schemes throughout Greece. This amalgamation of practical data and communal structuring approaches provided an archetype for pastoral advancement that foregrounded indigenous assets and collective potential rather than reliance on external support. During the 1950s, as agrarian mechanization and industrial expansion began transforming the agrarian Hellenic society, Dimitra's village steadfastly upheld its legacy of shared cultivation plots and collaborative asset stewardship. These practices continued to provide sustained nutritional stability and social solidarity, even despite the modernization of other facets of village existence. Subsequent generations who grew up in the village during the period of recuperation disseminated Dimitra's teachings with them, when they migrated to urban centers or founded households elsewhere. Her pervasive impact spread through unofficial channels of people who had learned that communities could endure challenging epochs through persistent teamwork and the judicious deployment of indigenous assets. In her declining years, Dimitra frequently contemplated how the village's most formidable obstacle had ultimately become its paramount asset. The existential threat that had imperiled everyone's survival had compelled the genesis of agrarian and communal frameworks that demonstrated superior longevity and proved more fulfilling than what had existed prior to the commencement of adversity. When she passed away in 1967, at the venerable age of 73, the village commemorated her legacy by preserving the communal plots she had established and perpetuating the collaborative customs she had helped develop. Her tombstone displayed the succinct epitaph: "She taught us that the earth provides enough for everyone when we know how to ask properly and how to share wisely." Potentially, the most productive terrain isn't the richest loam, but rather the populace where inhabitants grasp that mutual existence hinges upon each person's input. Conceivably, the most bountiful yields stem not from expansive private holdings, but from the accumulated insight that emerges when cohorts collaborate through arduous periods. Occasionally, the deity of cereals and vegetation imparts lessons most powerfully, not through supernatural plenitude, but through persistent illustrations that sufficiency is attainable when we amalgamate intellect, combine exertion, and possess benevolent spirits. The Foundry, a blacksmith's revolution in 1922. The potency of collective intellect and diligent collaboration transports us to industrialized Hellenic nation in 1922. During the monumental demographic transfer that ensued Greece's vanquishment in Asia Minor, countless displaced Greeks were arriving in mainland Greece, inundating urban centers and creating pressing demands for shelter, avenues for livelihood, and prospects for prosperity. The arrival of vast numbers of refugees often presents profound societal challenges, particularly concerning their integration into new communities and the provision of essential housing, stable employment, and sustainable economic opportunities. Within the vibrant port city of Piraeus, an unassuming metalworking shop bore witness to an extraordinary partnership between a seasoned master craftsman and exiles, culminating in a truly remarkable and impactful endeavor. Long before the first rays of dawn pierced the sky, one would invariably find the proprietor diligently stoking the furnace in a workshop that, despite its modest dimensions, exuded an air of perpetual, bustling activity. Michalis Volakis had presided over this esteemed metalworking establishment for a decade and a half, meticulously cultivating a distinguished renown for his creations, which were renowned for being both aesthetically pleasing yet highly functional. His portfolio encompassed bespoke wrought iron creations for affluent households, meticulous restoration and maintenance services for prominent shipping companies, and the crafting of bespoke implements for local artisans who demanded instruments of utmost exactitude. However, when refugee vessels commenced their unprecedented influx, arriving in overwhelming numbers, Michalis observed firsthand the plight of families bereft of all possessions save for their attire, striving valiantly to forge new existences in a nation whose capacity to assist them was severely constrained. While many of these displaced individuals had been entrepreneurs, erudite experts, or adept artisans in Asia Minor, their previous credentials held diminished relevance in a new country where they were unfamiliar with the indigenous frameworks and lacked pre-existing commercial networks. In response to this pressing humanitarian crisis, Michalis made a profound decision that perplexed his long-standing clientele and instilled concern among his business associates. Rather than continuing to focus solely on his lucrative bespoke commissions, he began extending opportunities for gainful occupation and vocational instruction to refugees possessing even rudimentary familiarity with metalwork, tool-making, or related crafts. Consequently, his small atelier transformed into a mutually beneficial enterprise that consciously placed the generation of livelihoods above the pursuit of peak financial returns. Among his initial refugee employees were accomplished metallurgists from prominent cities such as Smyrna and Constantinople, alongside others who had practiced their trade prior to the demographic transfer. These skilled individuals introduced a wealth of knowledge concerning techniques and designs that were previously unencountered within the Hellenic mainland, thereby fostering groundbreaking advancements that neither the refugees nor Michalis could have developed had they operated in isolation. The workshop soon commenced fabricating items that integrated indigenous Hellenic metallurgical artistry with methods gleaned from Ottoman and Byzantine traditions, which the refugees vividly recalled from their ancestral lands. These amalgamated aesthetic concepts resulted in singular creations that captivated patrons seeking products both recognizable and uniquely captivating. Ironwork that epitomized the intricate tapestry of Greece's complex cultural legacy, rather than merely reflecting prevailing Hellenic mainland aesthetics. Georgios Kanakos, who had previously overseen a substantial metallurgical enterprise in Trebizond before the exchange, contributed invaluable knowledge of bespoke metallic compounds and sophisticated refinement methodologies. This expertise allowed the workshop to undertake projects that had previously surpassed their prior capacities. His specialized knowledge harmonized perfectly with Michalis's astute insight into indigenous commercial landscapes and operational methodologies, thereby forging a partnership that profoundly enriched the competencies of both individuals. As the workshop's reputation for its proficiencies and its dedication to providing livelihoods for the displaced proliferated, commissions began arriving from unforeseen origins. Other refugee communities, for instance, commissioned metallurgical artifacts for the Eastern Orthodox ecclesiastical structures they were establishing in their nascent neighborhoods. Concurrently, shipping companies required bespoke apparatus that combined robust resilience with the intricate ornamental features that only the refugee craftsmen could provide. The enterprise's burgeoning success thus created further opportunities for refugee integration into the workforce. However, such growth demanded more than merely recruiting further personnel. The newly employed individuals required stable shelter. Their families necessitated assimilation into established social fabrics, and the burgeoning business required robust structural frameworks that could manage swift proliferation while upholding rigorous benchmarks of excellence. Michalis's ultimate solution proved groundbreaking in its contemporary context. Instead of merely enlarging his individual enterprise, he proactively facilitated the creation of an interconnected system of modest metallurgical collectives distributed across the refugee communities of Piraeus. Each cooperative was administered by experienced refugee craftsmen, but preserved an affiliation with the original workshop for specialized guidance, pooled assets, and harmonized promotional efforts. This innovative system empowered refugee families to achieve financial autonomy while simultaneously safeguarding the ancestral artisanal expertise they had carried from their homelands. The cooperatives adeptly produced both utilitarian goods essential for the refugee communities and niche commodities that could be successfully marketed through wider commercial avenues across the Hellenic nation. The pioneering characteristic of this network was its sophisticated methodology for advancing proficiencies and disseminating expertise. Veteran artisans from diverse, displaced populations imparted their specific areas of mastery to workers from other backgrounds, thereby creating interdisciplinary instruction that enhanced the collective competencies and safeguarded methodologies that might otherwise have been irrevocably lost amidst the upheaval caused by the demographic transfer. Young refugees who had been learners or novices in their former homes found themselves able to finalize their vocational education within this cooperative system, acquiring both time-honored methods and the modifications requisite for the prevailing Greek commercial environment. This pedagogical aspect guaranteed that particularized artisanal expertise would be transmitted to successive cohorts, notwithstanding the profound territorial and societal upheaval families had experienced. By 1924, the metalworking cooperative network was fabricating goods that were not only distributed across the Hellenic nation, but also shipped to various nations bordering the Mediterranean Sea. Refugee craftsmen were creating products that embodied their ancestral legacy while simultaneously satisfying modern demands, thereby forging financial underpinnings for enduring residency in their new country. State administrators and welfare agencies began examining this collaborative paradigm as a viable methodology for financial assimilation throughout Greece. The system's unequivocal success evinced that displaced populations could become valuable fiscal contributions rather than mere philanthropic dilemmas when their skills were acknowledged and cultivated judiciously. Michalis's function progressively evolved from sole proprietor of the atelier to a central facilitator and expert consultant for the burgeoning consortium. His initial metallurgical facility transformed into a specialized vocational academy and central repository of expertise, where new cooperatives could utilize bespoke apparatus, obtain expert guidance, and liaise with fellow participants across the network. The cooperative's success garnered considerable interest from metallurgical enterprises throughout Greece, who were eager to assimilate the methodologies and aesthetic forms that the refugees had introduced from Anatolia. This created further avenues for mutual transfer of expertise and commercial collaboration, yielding advantages for both the displaced and the indigenous populations. As the 1920s unfolded and Greece's economy achieved equilibrium, the metalworking cooperatives gradually transformed into enduring commercial entities that sustained the livelihood of successive family cohorts. Many of these evolved into thriving autonomous ventures, steadfastly adhering to collaborative tenets while cultivating unique areas of expertise and carving out distinct commercial segments. The network's impact transcended mere financial considerations. The cooperatives also became focal points for social interaction, where refugee families could uphold their ancestral bonds while assimilating into their new homeland. Hallowed festivities, sacred rituals, and communal assemblies played a vital role in safeguarding crucial elements of the displaced population's legacy while simultaneously fostering rapport with their indigenous Hellenic counterparts. Michalis maintained his engagement with the cooperative network until his cessation of active professional life in the 1940s. His founding atelier had, by then, morphed into a specialized vocational academy that provided sophisticated instruction for metalworkers across the Hellenic nation, seamlessly integrating age-old artisanal wisdom with contemporary manufacturing methodologies. During World War II, the cooperative network's technical proficiencies became pivotal for insurgent operations and sustained livelihood amidst foreign dominion. The artisans' skills, managerial acumen, and extensive social linkages made them indispensable participants in both armed opposition and efforts for public sustenance. Following the cessation of hostilities, several of the former refugee cooperatives ascended to become prominent manufacturing enterprises that played a pivotal role in Greece's financial resurgence. Their success illustrated unequivocally how communities uprooted by geopolitical strife could become wellsprings of commercial ingenuity and societal enhancement when their skills were acknowledged and fostered judiciously. In the 1960s, as Greece embarked upon a period of swift manufacturing expansion, many of the methodologies and structural tenets developed by the refugee metalworking cooperatives were integrated into more substantial industrial ventures. The synthesis of ancestral artisanal wisdom and collaborative oversight had created manufacturing paradigms that demonstrated significant utility in contemporary industrial contexts. Scholars examining the era of refugee assimilation consistently recognized the metalworking cooperative network as one of the preeminent instances of financial adjustment achieved by uprooted communities in 20th century Greece. This innovative model subsequently shaped humanitarian aid frameworks and commercial growth blueprints throughout the entire Mediterranean basin. When Michalis passed away in 1952 at the age of 68, his funeral was graced by a multitude of individuals whose fortunes had been transformed by his profound generosity in imparting his workshop, his specialized knowledge, and his invaluable business connections to refugees who had arrived with only their innate capabilities and their resolute spirit to rebuild their lives. The true strength of a material may not always stem from its exposure to the most intense heat, but rather from the patient, collaborative efforts of skilled artisans who expertly blend various techniques. Similarly, the most invaluable implements are perhaps not those fashioned by solitary masters, but instead emerge when diverse communities pool their collective wisdom and strive toward common objectives. Indeed, the deity of the forge and flame often imparts its most profound lessons, not through grand, ostentatious displays of might, but through understated demonstrations that the most enduring creations are born from mutual cooperation, a deep reverence for specialized abilities, and an open willingness to impart knowledge to those eager to learn. This ethos underpins remarkable tales of quiet heroism. The compelling narrative of the courier's clandestine correspondence in occupied Greece unfolds during one of the most somber chapters in modern Greek history. The brutal German occupation, which spanned from 1941 to 1944. During this oppressive era, every form of communication was meticulously scrutinized, travel was severely curtailed, and any acts of resistance demanded an unparalleled degree of secrecy and discretion. Amidst this stifling environment, an unassuming postal worker in occupied Athens, known as Tashados, saw his seemingly mundane occupation transform into a pivotal lifeline for the intricate resistance networks operating across central Greece. Each morning, one would have observed him diligently at the central post office, meticulously sifting through official dispatches, heavily censored letters, and the relentless stream of propaganda materials that constituted the bulk of the postal system's traffic under the occupation regime. To all outward appearances, Hermes embodied precisely what his role suggested: a middle-aged civil servant with 2 decades of experience in communications, who meticulously kept a low profile and scrupulously adhered to all regulations solely to safeguard his employment during these exceptionally challenging times. His co-workers perceived nothing out of the ordinary concerning his diligent work habits, his unwavering efficiency, or his adeptness at navigating the intricate routing demands that the occupation authorities had imposed upon the postal infrastructure. Hermes conscientiously processed governmental correspondence, managed international mail under the stringent German censorship directives, and meticulously handled the myriad bureaucratic documents essential for keeping postal services operational, despite the pervasive wartime disruptions and critical personnel shortages. He was, in essence, a cog in the machine, seemingly without variation. What remained entirely unnoticed by his peers, however, was that Hermes had cultivated an extraordinary and profound comprehension of communication patterns, document security protocols, and information networks that vastly transcended the requirements of his official position. His seemingly encyclopedic knowledge appeared to be derived from an extensive background in international correspondence, diplomatic communications, and complex message routing, a depth of expertise that simply could not be accounted for by his documented work history alone. This hidden acumen was his greatest asset. The German occupation authorities had, with ruthless efficiency, established draconian controls over all forms of postal communications. Letters were routinely intercepted, opened, and perused. Any correspondence deemed suspicious was promptly confiscated, and individuals apprehended transmitting unauthorized information faced severe retributions, including prolonged imprisonment or even summary execution. The entire postal system had, in effect, been perverted into a sophisticated surveillance apparatus, serving as much to monitor as to communicate. Despite these pervasive and severe restrictions, disparate resistance groups scattered throughout Greece desperately required secure methods to coordinate their clandestine activities, disseminate vital intelligence, and maintain crucial contact between their isolated cells operating in diverse geographical regions. Conventional communication channels were simply too perilous, yet sustained resistance operations were utterly unfeasible without some form of dependable and secure information exchange. This was the chasm Hermes quietly bridged. Hermes, with remarkable discretion, emerged as the ingenious solution to this seemingly intractable problem. Operating meticulously within the confines of the official postal system, he devised sophisticated methodologies for transmitting resistance information that, on the surface, appeared to fully conform with occupation regulations, while in reality, they expertly facilitated unauthorized communication among resistance factions across central Greece and even further afield. His ingenuity was a beacon in the darkness. His chosen approach was truly remarkable for its inherent subtlety and profound sophistication. Rather than attempting to overtly conceal forbidden messages or construct conspicuous secret communication systems that would inevitably draw unwanted attention, Hermes ingeniously embedded resistance-critical information within legitimate postal communications. These documents then passed through the normal, rigorous censorship procedures without ever arousing the slightest suspicion from the watchful German authorities. For instance, seemingly innocuous business correspondence exchanged between various companies might discreetly contain vital intelligence regarding German troop movements, cleverly disguised as routine shipping schedules. Similarly, heartfelt family letters could include precise details about resistance safehouses, artfully woven into discussions about relatives' health updates and housing situations. Even official government communications were, on occasion, subtly modified to incorporate intelligence that proved invaluable to ongoing resistance operations, all without detection. The successful implementation of this intricate system demanded extraordinary precision and a flawless understanding of the precise mechanisms of German censorship. Hermes had to possess an intimate knowledge of exactly what types of language and information would successfully clear inspection, how to subtly modify documents without leaving any detectable traces, and crucially, how to coordinate with his resistance contacts without inadvertently establishing discernible patterns that surveillance might identify. Every detail was critical. His continued success hinged entirely on maintaining an utterly normal outward appearance and behavior, all while expertly managing a complex and sprawling information network that seamlessly linked resistance cells from the bustling streets of Athens to the distant city of Thessaloniki, from isolated mountain villages to vital port cities. Any single misstep could expose not only Hermes himself to grave danger, but also dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals whose very lives depended on the absolute security of these communications. The stakes could not have been higher. Maria Alexandro, who served as a secretary in a shipping company that was, in truth, a cleverly disguised resistance front, later recounted the system as nothing short of miraculous in its efficacy and terrifying in the sheer magnitude of its inherent risks. Critical information that resistance leaders desperately required would mysteriously appear, expertly embedded within routine business documents that had, astonishingly, passed through the meticulous German censorship without any apparent issues or flags. The network's most paramount function was the precise coordination of sabotage operations, which demanded exact timing and specific location details. Crucial actions such as bridge demolitions, strategic disruptions of supply lines, and synchronized assaults on German installations were only made feasible when resistance groups possessed accurate, timely intelligence regarding targets, prevailing security arrangements, and narrow timing windows for execution. Without Hermes, such operations would have been impossible. Hermes masterfully facilitated this essential coordination by embedding these critical operational details within correspondence that appeared entirely innocent. For example, a letter discussing innocuous family vacation plans might subtly convey crucial information about German patrol schedules. Similarly, business correspondence ostensibly about delivery routes could secretly include precise details regarding bridge vulnerabilities and the specific security arrangements in place, all hidden in plain sight. As the resistance movement expanded its reach and German countermeasures grew increasingly sophisticated, Hermes's ingenious communication system continuously evolved to maintain its security while simultaneously handling an ever-growing volume of highly sensitive information. His methods became progressively more elaborate, yet also demonstrably more secure, constantly adapting to the changing surveillance techniques employed by the occupation forces and the dynamic operational requirements of the resistance. The system's true success was measured not merely by the numerous resistance operations it enabled, but crucially by its absolute invisibility to the German intelligence apparatus. Throughout the entirety of the occupation, German authorities remained completely unaware that their very own postal censorship system was being expertly exploited to facilitate vital resistance communications. Hermes's network remained absolutely secure and undetected, despite handling thousands upon thousands of highly sensitive messages, a testament to his unparalleled skill and discretion. His personal life remained as utterly unremarkable as his professional demeanor. Hermes resided alone in a modest apartment, maintained minimal social contacts, and meticulously avoided any activities that might potentially attract unwanted attention. His only apparent interests were his demanding work and occasional solitary strolls through various Athens neighborhoods, during which he would keenly observe prevailing conditions and subtly gather information that proved invaluable for ongoing resistance operations. During the final, tumultuous year of the occupation, as Allied victory became an increasingly certain prospect and German control began to visibly wane, Hermes's communication network ascended to a crucial role in coordinating the complex transition from active resistance to eventual liberation. Resistance groups urgently needed to avert internal conflicts, while simultaneously preparing for the anticipated German withdrawal and the subsequent establishment of a post-war government. The network played an indispensable role in facilitating delicate negotiations between the various, often disparate resistance factions. It expertly coordinated with Allied liaison teams and significantly aided in managing the complex political and military challenges that the impending liberation inevitably presented. Information that had previously been utilized for daring acts of sabotage and critical intelligence gathering now served to support concerted efforts to establish a legitimate civilian government and maintain order during the tumultuous transition period. When German forces finally withdrew from Athens in October 1944, Hermes continued his work at the post office as if absolutely nothing had transpired. His colleagues observed no perceptible difference in his behavior or his professional responsibilities. The extraordinary communication network that had so steadfastly supported resistance operations throughout the entire occupation simply vanished, as if it had never existed, leaving no trace. Post-war investigations conducted by Greek intelligence and Allied authorities unearthed extensive evidence of highly sophisticated resistance communication systems, yet they were utterly unable to conclusively identify precisely how such secure and intricate information networks had been so effectively maintained under the relentless German occupation. The technical capabilities and the remarkable organizational coordination that had been achieved appeared to far exceed what should have been realistically possible, given the stringent security restrictions and advanced surveillance capabilities that German authorities had so meticulously implemented. Several prominent resistance leaders subsequently attempted to locate Hermes after the cessation of hostilities, hoping to formally acknowledge his invaluable contributions and meticulously document his ingenious methods for historical preservation. However, he had quietly relinquished his position at the post office shortly after liberation, and all subsequent attempts to trace his whereabouts proved entirely unsuccessful. Personnel records merely indicated that his employment had been properly terminated, but no forwarding address or any information regarding subsequent employment was ever made available, leaving his true fate a mystery. During the post-war decades, scholars meticulously examining the clandestine messaging of resistance movements repeatedly observed the remarkable efficacy and operational prowess of the intelligence pipelines active throughout the period of enemy occupation. Yet they remained perennially baffled by the mechanisms through which such intricate and advanced communication infrastructures managed to evade discovery and sustain their operations without compromise. The exceptional degree of synchronization and impenetrable secrecy attained strongly implied a level of organizational acumen and logistical capacity far surpassing what the officially recorded assets and personnel of the resistance apparatus could reasonably account for or ostensibly provide. Former combatants and survivors of the underground opposition would, on rare occasions, allude to an enigmatic individual employed within the postal service who possessed an uncanny ability to enable critical information exchange even when all conventional avenues for communication appeared utterly unfeasible or blocked. Their accounts frequently highlighted the uncanny precision with which vital dispatches reached their intended recipients precisely at the opportune moment, as well as the unwavering veracity of the intelligence transmitted and the seamless collaborative efforts that permitted the execution of triumphant missions, notwithstanding the formidable and pervasive surveillance mechanisms deployed by the German occupation forces. Such allusions, though invariably tinged with profound reverence, consistently remained shrouded in a deliberate ambiguity, as if the seasoned participants of the resistance understood intrinsically that certain pivotal contributions were of a nature too delicate and strategically vital to ever be exhaustively chronicled, even many decades subsequent to the actual occurrences. It appeared they intuitively grasped that the most profound tribute to specific acts of selfless dedication lay in upholding the very veil of secrecy and prudence which had, from the outset, rendered such invaluable assistance achievable and effective. The very edifice of the postal facility, where Hermes had once diligently performed his duties, underwent multiple extensive structural modernizations and aesthetic refurbishments throughout the ensuing post-conflict era. Yet veteran personnel within its walls would periodically recount extraordinary and perplexing phenomena. These included instances where postal articles were conveyed to their recipients with a dispatch and precision that far surpassed the capabilities or prescribed timelines of standard operational protocols, or messages that miraculously found their intended targets even when crucial addressing discrepancies or omissions should have rendered delivery utterly improbable, and, at times, ingenious routing methodologies that materialized seemingly out of thin air, offering elegant resolutions to distribution challenges that had previously appeared utterly insurmountable. Irrespective of whether these peculiar observations were merely the lingering echoes or phantom vestiges of the highly specialized wartime communication paradigms, or indicative of an extraordinary level of proficiency cultivated by subsequent generations of postal employees who had assiduously absorbed and adapted from the exemplary precedents set before them, or indeed sprang from an altogether different, perhaps even metaphysical source. They unequivocally intimated that certain profound insights regarding the paramount importance of efficient information, transfer, and steadfast, dependable public service had indelibly imprinted themselves upon the very fabric and operational ethos of the establishment, where these principles were initially and so remarkably demonstrated. It is conceivable that the communications of greatest consequence are not those heralded by ostentatious displays or public acclamation, but rather those vital dispatches that, with silent efficiency and absolute security, arrive at their precise intended points of reception precisely at the moment of their utmost necessity. Furthermore, one might surmise that the truly celestial envoys are not those who proclaim their presence with theatrical flourishes or overt demonstrations of power, but instead are those sagacious individuals who comprehend that authentic and profound service occasionally necessitates operating from a position of utter anonymity, diligently ensuring the unimpeded transmission of pivotal intelligence to its requisite destinations, all without ever drawing attention to the meticulous craftsmanship and profound foresight underpinning such indispensable communicative feats. Occasionally, the revered deity presiding over the realms of communication and rapid transit truly fulfills their highest purpose by imparting to humanity the profound wisdom that the most indispensable exchanges of information are invariably realized through the steadfast application of unwavering patience, meticulous exactitude, and an unyielding, absolute dedication to forging vital connections between individuals who possess an urgent mutual need to communicate, entirely irrespective of any formidable impediments or formidable barriers that may obstruct their path. Every such revelation serves as a poignant affirmation that the divine essence may not necessarily reveal itself through ostentatious spectacles or overtly supernatural marvels, but rather through the quiet, persistent endeavors of patient individuals who, with profound dedication, deploy their unique innate talents, be they in the realm of pedagogy, guardianship, artistic innovation, fostering development, or indeed facilitating interpersonal bonds, to substantively fortify, enlighten, and imbue their respective communities with a greater sense of optimism, both amidst the routines of quotidian existence and during periods of monumental adversity. This contemplation, perhaps, offers the most profound solace as we prepare to embrace slumber. The reassuring understanding that the very attributes most indispensable to our collective well-being, namely sagacity, fortitude, imaginative ingenuity, compassionate solicitude, and unfailingly dependable channels of communication, are perpetually within our reach, frequently manifesting in the most unanticipated locales and through the most unassuming guises. The most humble forms frequently harbor the deepest significance, serving as the foundational bedrock from which intricate complexities emerge. These elementary structures, often dismissed for their apparent simplicity, are nevertheless the indispensable components upon which elaborate systems and sophisticated designs are meticulously constructed. One might consider, for example, the fundamental geometric shapes, the circle, the square, the triangle, which, despite their unassuming appearance, function as the essential building blocks for awe-inspiring architectural wonders and profound artistic creations spanning various civilizations and historical periods. Likewise, in the natural realm, the most unpretentious biological entities, such as solitary cellular organisms, embody the primordial schematics of life, illustrating how even the most basic cellular arrangements can blossom into an astonishing array of biodiversity. It is within these modest configurations, these seemingly minor constituents, that one often discerns the purest essence and the most enduring principles, thereby highlighting their crucial, though frequently understated role in the broader tapestry of existence.